all come forward on the material and on the K-12 mental health we didn't get to earlier because you were elsewhere, the State Department.
And Mr. Chairman, whenever you are ready to go, we are ready over here.
Okay. We've got a quorum. We're ready to go. State Department, you're on.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Education Committee. My name is Wanda Maloney, and I am privileged to be here with Dustin Brown, and we are both from the Department of Education. Along with that, I'll make sure that Dustin is on. Yes, he is. Jay Curtis will also be speaking on behalf as a superintendent in some of the efforts that we have incorporated. So one of the things that we'll cover, we'll talk about Project Aware, which is a project that we've implemented with 14 districts. We'll go over the substance abuse and mental health projects that we have. And then we'll talk a little bit about the new legislation that designated money for each of the districts in the form of $10 million. And then lastly, we had the privilege, the superintendent held stakeholder meetings with superintendents, also with our level up teachers who are distinguished teachers across the district. We also met with the Wyoming Counselors Association and then also our Project Aware districts. And so I will give you some feedback in terms of the efforts that we have incorporated as a district or as a department.
Let's be brief and to the point.
Okay, absolutely. Mr. Chairman, we will do that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dustin Brown to walk through Project Aware.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Joint Education Committee. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Joint Education Committee, thank you for your time. With Wyoming Project Aware, as you all know, we were here last year discussing Wyoming Project Aware. A key point to Wyoming Project Aware is our functional data. Over the last 4 years, we've been measuring functional data, social connectedness, and looking at outcomes for the students that are being served by Wyoming Project Aware. The good news with Wyoming Project Aware is our functional data is amazing. We see students come into the program in the 30, 40, 50th percentile of functioning with life challenges and social situations. And whenever we go through the Aware project and the Aware process, which typically takes a student about 4 to 4.5 months, we see their functioning data jump up to the 80 and 90th percentiles. So we know that Wyoming Project Aware is proving successful. With this, we have a slate of projects that we've collectively worked on over the last 4 years. A suicide postvention guide, which helps and supports the districts post unexpected loss. We also have care coordination with Care Solace, which is kind of a gateway into behavioral health, mental health, substance use services. And then lastly, we have our Thrive framework. Our Thrive framework is a tier 1 model in which we implement the framework in and of itself, and we just finished a sample size for one of our cohorts of 7 participating schools/districts. We are also launching a BAR pilot in the 24-25 school year, in which we'll have 6 participating schools, and those schools will launch the BAR model over the next 3 school years. So we're doing we have a lot of efforts occurring in this area currently. And with that, Ms. Maloney, if I could turn it over to you for the stakeholder meeting. We got a lot of really good information.
Thank you. Thank you, Dustin, for adding that. Mr. Chair, one of the appropriations that we received was under Chapter 118, Section 331. There was appropriated $10 million from the School Foundation account, and that will be given to the Department of Education to establish a grant. Under that grant, we will use the school's daily average membership, and that will be for the 2024-25 school year, and then also for the 2025-26 school year. And so we are in the process of estimating those budgetary allotments and hope to have that out to our districts in the fall of this coming school year. And then with that, as we draft emergency rules, there are some requirements that we will need to collect information from the districts. So the three things that we'll be collecting from the districts in terms of the allocation of money that they receive is, first of all, the expenditure. What did they use the money for? And we know that several of the districts are different in sizes, and so it will be depend on their allocation in terms of what they decide to use it for. They'll also have to report the number of students that receive those services. And then the last thing that they need to report to is the impact of those students, of those measures that they incorporated. And we will be putting together common measures so that the legislature will have the opportunity to look at those across all districts. We'll be looking at pre-surveys, post-surveys, very similar to what we've done with the NOMS data, as Dustin referred to. And it's really about their resiliency and how are they coping in school. And not only the student will we collect that information, we'll also collect that from an educator to say, did you see this impact in the student? Were they resilient? Are you seeing changes in some of the behaviors that are happening? So that is our update on the session law and the finances and the support, the allocation that we'll provide. With that, I'll turn it over to Jay Curtis, the superintendent, to give us just an update in terms of the work that he has incorporated from Project Aware.
Mr. Chairman, I finally get to come up here and talk about Project Aware. We just like third try is, I guess, the charm. I will be brief, I promise, but I am going to take us back just a little bit to where Project Aware started and where it is now. So this is kind of a boots on the ground look. My district had actually applied for multiple grants two years prior to being selected for the SAMHSA grant, which was the birth of Project Aware. We had been applying in Powell with one of our local agencies for grant money, never got one. We were approved for Project Aware. At that time, we were calling it the SAMHSA grant. And we had really one purpose in mind. That purpose was to reduce barriers to mental health for children. We have seen in district, I don't have to tell you what mental health looks like in children today. It's been on a steady decline for the last decade, and schools are doing all they can to address it. Now, what started as just trying to reduce barriers for kids has evolved into a comprehensive framework of addressing mental health for students. And that comprehensive framework is, we have developed a multi-tiered system of support for mental health. There's tier one, and just in layman's terms, tier one is something that all kids get. 100% of kids benefit from tier one services. And our tier one services are SEL, or social emotional learning. Other tier one services are that we've provided high quality professional development for all the adults in our system, as well as for the parents in our community, as well as other community agencies in our community. Those trainings range anything from youth mental health first aid. We invited all the clergy, the churches from around our district to participate in that. We've also provided high quality professional development in trauma-informed instruction. And we've provided that not just for our teachers, but we've even provided it for parents. We've provided it for bus drivers. We've provided it for paraprofessionals, everyone who deals with our kids. Tier two is more targeted. And just so you know, tier three, again, or excuse me, tier one, that's 100% of kids. Tier two, which is about 15% of students that need tier two intervention. And that will be things more like we reach out to parents. We are having parent meetings. We are doing kind of wraparound or group type lessons that are targeted for specific populations. And then tier three, that is for 3 to 5% of the population. That's where the use of our outside counselors come into play. And so just for perspective, our grant is it was $2 million over 5 years, which is about $400,000 a year, give or take a little bit. And in any given year of that $400,000, we pay for one person that's works for Park One, and that is our community mental health coordinator. Now, I just want to talk about how powerful that position has been in Powell. That person is charged with not only getting all of our mental health professionals on the same page, they are also charged with creating those community connections, establishing those agreements with outside entities, Heritage Health, formerly Heritage Health, now One Health in Powell, Yellowstone Behavioral Health, Chrysalis for addiction treatment. That person has also been responsible for putting on a tremendous number of programs for our parents, because our parents are, there's a large group of them that are finally realizing also that our kids, their kids are in trouble. So after that, then we have agreements with outside mental health providers, One Health and Yellowstone Behavior. We've served since 2021, the fall of 2021. Through that, we have had almost 170 students who have received therapy. Now, when I talked earlier about reducing barriers to treatment, barriers were time. Like if we would refer to them to treatment and tell a parent, here's the list of providers, we think your child needs help, oftentimes that wasn't translating into students receiving help after school. So we created these agreements so that students could receive their therapy during the school day. We're bringing outside therapists, providing space in our district, in every building, for them to provide that. Now, just to be clear, this all happens with parent consent. Like we're not just bringing outside therapists in to work with our kids without having parents on board. In addition to that, in part of our agreement is they have they call it a mental health CNA, I believe, where One Health has an assistant that coordinates all of this care, coordinates with teachers to be bringing students in for therapy, coordinates with parents to make sure that they know when students are having therapy. And then we pay them also a little bit for the billing, because part of this is not just that kids are receiving therapy, but it's that, we are charging insurance. And I shouldn't say we're charging insurance. One Health is charging insurance. So they have their billing department is able to work with insurance companies, bill for Medicaid when they need to. And then also a portion of the money is helping students to pay who are underinsured or uninsured to receive those services at no cost to them. We only spend about $25,000 a year on that. We have a benefit in Powell that the providers that we use are federally qualified so that they're a sliding scale. So for low-income students, those visits are often as low as $5 because of the sliding scale. So $25,000 can go a long way when you're only paying $5 per session. Now, in addition to, so that's kind of how the money gets used. And then just, I guess, a few more things, the benefits that we see, and I want to say that this is part of a bigger picture in Powell. My board 5 years ago decided that mental health was going to be a focus on our strategic plan, and they decided that they were going to commit the resources necessary to address this. Since that time, we have increased our staffing in mental health professionals. We have one counselor per elementary school. We have 2 regular ed counselors at our middle school. We have 3 regular ed counselors at our high school, 1 full-time counselor at our alternative school. And then there's a few special ed counselors that work with just our special ed population. So we are at or slightly above the ratio of counselor to students that is recommended by national associations, American School Counselors Association. And so all of this is working together. We always ask, well, what's the proof that it's working? I can tell you one metric that is really easy to understand is in the last 5 years, we have the highest recorded 5-year average graduation rate, 92% graduation rate in Powell over the last 5 years. Now, full transparency, our graduation rate, 4-year graduation rate was 88% this year. So that's kind of being pulled upward by a 94% 2 years ago. But that 88% is also explainable. That's kind of the COVID drag. And we've also gotten several of those kids back in and got them graduated. So our 5-year graduation rate is going to be high, but that one's easy to see. Graduation rate has never been higher in Powell than it has been for the last 5 years, that mental health has been a focus. We also have, through the data that Dustin was talking about a few minutes ago, some of the things that our kids have told us through that survey data is that they now know how to access help more so than they ever have before, because it's become one of the barriers, by the way, was stigma. And stigma is not gone around mental health, but we're moving the needle. It's going down. More and more people are recognizing the need for addressing mental health in the same way that we address physical health. Because just to be really clear, a kid cannot learn. We cannot expect them to learn what we want them to learn if they are struggling with depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. These are real things that our kids are facing at unprecedented levels right now. They can't learn. And if not us, then who? So we take it pretty seriously in Powell. We've done a lot of work around it. Project Aware has been an absolute tremendous boost for us in Powell. And as I've said before, there's parts of it that are going to be very sustainable when the SAMHSA funds dry up. There's parts of it that are not going to be sustainable. Parts that are sustainable, we now know how much our community providers want to partner with us. We don't have to spend a ton of money to create those partnerships. More and more people are realizing that this is a community problem. It's not a school problem. It's not a parent problem. This is a community problem that takes community solutions. And so those agreements, those are easy. We'll continue those easy, and they'll still be able to be providing care through insurance and Medicaid. The parts that are not sustainable unless there's additional funding in some way, shape, or form are going to be the underinsured and uninsured care. I don't know that it's appropriate or reasonable even to ask the state to pay for that. So I don't know what to do about that. But other parts that are not sustainable is, we have one full-time equivalency of a person who is not in any way, shape, or form paid for through the school funding model. That's our community mental health coordinator. Now, we're looking for other grants to keep her because she is absolutely amazing. I wish it was her up here talking about this program and not me, because she would do it 5 times better than I am. But that's pretty much in a nutshell what Project Aware looks like in a district. And I'm happy to answer questions after the conclusion here.
Okay, briefly.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Can you talk about not just you hit the student aspect? What about your staff? With
So
Project Aware, have you used that for your staff?
thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Berger. So we haven't really addressed staff through that program. We, frankly, when all the ESSER funds came through, we dedicated a pretty good chunk of ESSER funds to addressing mental and physical health of our staff. We were providing wellness stipends, gym memberships. If you had our insurance, you could have money put in your HRA to be used towards mental health if you wanted to. But one of the things that we've recently done also, and this is through, huge thanks to the Wyoming School Boards Association, and I cannot remember for the life of me the name of the program, but there's a program that we're going to be paying for our people that don't take our insurance, where they're still going to get 5 telehealth visits with mental health professionals at no cost to them in the coming year. So every person in our district will have access to mental health telehealth, which is just my personal opinion. It's not as good as in person, but it's better than nothing. So it's come a long way. So.
Chairman Northrup.
Jay, can you tell us about your suicide rate?
So in Powell, and I always hate to say this out loud, but we have not been touched by, and I also hate this term, but a successful suicide in a number of years. Now, that does not mean that our counselors are not seeing a tremendous amount of suicidal ideation, because we do. One thing that has come out of this AWARE program is, and in our agreement with Yellowstone Behavioral, is we no longer have to, when a kid says, I no longer want to be with the world, we don't have to send them to the emergency room. We have direct access to Yellowstone Behavioral, who were the ones serving them at the, so we're saving families $1,000 bill of going to the emergency room by cutting the middleman out and going directly to Yellowstone Behavioral. And that has been a direct result of our Project Aware work.
Is Yellowstone Behavioral a private for profit? Is it the community health center? What is it?
So, and I keep saying Yellowstone Behavioral, and I believe it just changed. I think it's called Oxbow or something, but it's a cooperative of multiple. So they're in Basin, they're in Cody, they're in Powell. And I'm not sure I can answer if they're for profit or not, but what I can answer is that they are a federally qualified provider, so that they can provide that sliding scale for students who are accessing their mental health. And again, as low as $5 per session.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have you struggled with any capacity issues? Are they able to fill the need that the school has? Or do we need to consider expanding on our amount of resources?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, thank you for that question. The answer is we are at capacity and could certainly use more services. There are students, we have had far more students referred than we're able to serve. And when I say far more, some of them just don't qualify for various reasons. And as a side note, 98% of those referrals come from our school counselors to that program. And but I want to say that once they reach capacity, because one counselor can only see so many, but that's why we have multiple agreements now. So we do have multiple providers providing therapy. But we are at capacity and could certainly, there is more need than we are able to serve.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really liked what you were describing about getting the community involved and having that kind of mindset of it. It's going to take all of us working together, and including things like churches and even family, the extended families and things. Could you talk a little more about how you went about that and how you would judge initially the success of that? Is that something that's maybe growing, or is it awareness, or what do you stand on that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, thank you for that question. So when my mental health coordinator told me I'm going to run a program for our community after school, I hate to say, but I was very skeptical. I was like, well, you're going to get 10 people and 30 would show up. And then the next time we would have, and so the trainings that we've provided, by the way, to parents, we've offered that youth mental health first aid. We've done the trauma informed, but we've also provided Love and Logic and positive behavioral support programs for our community. And, and then one more thing, and this was in partnership with, and I forget the name of the group that we are part of, but it's a Park County, it's a mental health coalition, but they've actually created parent handbooks, like one for elementary students and one for secondary students that are just resources for parents to, like, how do you deal with your kids with phones? What are some resources you can read? How do you, how do you deal with depression as a parent? How do you help your student if they have depression? And so I think it is growing. Where I see it going is it's just, I hate to keep using this phrase, but I'm going to use a different phrase. Momentum is shifting in that direction. I feel like it's growing simply because more and more people are recognizing the issues that we are having.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to comment about Oxbow. It actually reaches the entire Bighorn Basin. I know Cow Peak and Worland participates. And the thing I think that's good about it is it opens up services throughout the basin. And so I thought you guys were a part of that as well. And I really think that's a really important strategic move for the whole basin in terms of dealing with mental health. So thank you for mentioning that.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you for assuring me that I had the right name, because I was not confident. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I've got a hard question for you, and so if you can't answer it, it's okay, but what is the root cause of all of this? I mean, we're seeing this at epidemic levels in our schools and our society. What are you identifying as a cause so that we're not just treating the symptoms, but the root of the issues as a society, as a school district? Do you have any answer to that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Steinmetz, that is the $1 million question. I have a theory and am currently reading a book called The Anxious Nation. And my theory, and it is purely my opinion, totally, there's nothing to base this on other than my experience and some of the research studies that I have read, is that the rise in mental health has been a direct correlate to the rise in use of technology and social media. And on a personal level, I will tell you that if I could go back and do it over with my own children, I would not give them a cell phone until they were about ready to go out into the world. If I had a magic wand, I actually share Representative Provenza's ideas on social media. I would eradicate it from the face of the planet, because I believe that it is primarily the root cause. The more I've read, and again, not an expert here, but the more that I've read is the use of technology is creating different neural pathways that did not exist in my generation. It is changing the way our brains work. It's changing our attention spans. And then you throw social media. I was talking to Representative Northrup about this very recently. This is every kid that I know that is past the age of the 5th grade is addicted. They have an addiction that we didn't have when we were kids. That addiction is one that they carry in their pockets almost at all times. I'm not sure what the answer is to that. Other than the root is, because we know one thing that is extraordinarily clear. We know that when parents and school and community health providers are all locked in arms and working in the same direction, we know great things happen for kids when that's happening. So in my mind, with this Project Aware, part of the power of that is the parent program. And me speaking as someone who my youngest is 22, almost 23, if I could go back, we can stand on that platform and tell these parents, like, do not give your kids phones. Access to this at such a young age is, in my mind, it's so damaging. But that's my theory only. And I wish I had a perfect answer for you, but that's the best one I've got.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Steinmetz, I just wanted to follow up with the fact that when we talk to stakeholders, we talk to counselors, we talk to teachers, they echoed the same thing. They said the use of technology and the screen time really, they believe, was causing some of the just inattention to focus and some of the self-regulating skills that they are really looking for in students. And I just wanted to further comment on the Superintendent Degenfelder and the work that she's doing to make sure that any system or program that we put in place really addresses making sure parents feel empowered, they feel informed, that there's transparency with the process, that we are working hand in hand with them to make sure that these systems are helpful for students. And so I think the $1 million question is, where do we go next? And that was part of the reason that she held these stakeholder meetings, was to talk to those in the districts to find out, is this working? Are you seeing benefits? And from every district that we talk to in terms of implementation, they are seeing the benefits. They are seeing that kids and families are coming together, that there's more parental engagement, that some of the stigma associated with mental health is also being dissolved. And so we are seeing success with this program, and she's really trying to envision next steps. And one of the things we heard also from counselors is how do we restore resiliency in students? So we're looking as that as a base, resiliency and grit. How do we keep these kids on the track to have those skills that they need? And then following that, if we do need to intervene and identify kids, what would that look like? Making sure that we're engaging and involving parents. And then the referral process. I just wanted to close with saying some of our smaller districts, had they not had this program, Superintendent Curtis talked about having the connections, having somebody else that could provide those supports. And now you have a much better system in place with the community to be able to address some of those needs. So we're excited about the fact that the community connections are stronger, are being strengthened throughout districts. Even the adults mentioned, with our Care Solace program, that even if they go to ask for mental health, or they pull up in front of the counselor's office, or, in a small town, everybody sees that they pull up and do that. But if they're able to get telehealth and get support, that also could support our teachers as well. So thank you for your time and listening to our impact with Project Aware.
Okay, let me ask one general question. How hard would it be to deploy some device that would jam the cell phones within the schools?
Mr. Chairman, I'm told that that would violate federal law to do so. And so I think pretty hard. That's my direct answer. Because I've had that idea, just so you know, and my technology director said, I don't think you want to do that.
Interrupt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think we all agree on the cell phones being a challenge, but there's two sides to mental health, and one is making sure that we have appropriate support and that we can address those needs to the best of our ability. The other side is obviously what's that causal aspect of it? Why are we seeing so many mental health challenges and so many of our students struggling? And I'm curious, on that side, what have we done to try to explore and understand better? What are the pressures? What are the causes? I think a lot of what we're focusing on is the solution side, but what can we do on the prevention side? And do we have any good insight into that? Which I think is probably a lot of talking to students and talking to counselors that talk to students and understanding better maybe what has changed. What are those underlying pressures? Do we have a sense?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, there's an underlying consensus that trauma plays a very significant role. That's in large part how the SAMHSA grants are moving forward in a direction, is understanding that trauma often manifests itself as anxiety, depression, adjustment disorder. Some of the things, if you'll reference the Wyoming Department of Education memo, you'll see reflected in our top diagnosis. It's not a one size fits all. While trauma may be a leading cause of a leading originator of mental health needs, the family plays a significant role. Nature and nurture play a role. There's many answers to this question, but a lot of the research right now is focused on trauma.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, one just very brief answer is we believe that there are certain things that we can control as a school and certain things that we can't. We have a tendency, and when we have conversations, that's a question asked: control, can't control, because we're not going to talk about things we can't control. We're going to talk about things that we can control. However, I would say that we're just on we're really on the front of doing some great things for the response. I think that now we may be in a position to start talking about the prevention, because at this point, it's just been happening to us. We've been understaffed for it. We were ill prepared for it. School districts across the country were ill prepared for the exponential rise in this. So we've just been responding to it at this point. And I feel like just the fact that we're having this conversation in a legislative meeting today means we're starting to get a lot of people on the same team looking at the same direction. I think now would be a great time to start having a conversation about prevention.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A little bit follow up on that prevention idea, and could you talk a little bit about how you interact with DFS, who like they have the Why Home program that is very preventative and kind of in some ways I see collaboration there, but I don't know how that would actually work on the ground. Of were there these initiatives like through DFS to address some issues within families and things early on, identify and come alongside and help? And is there any coordination with those efforts? Can you talk about that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I really wish that one of my counselors was here to talk to you about that. What I can tell you, and full transparency, my wife is a school counselor, so I have a very unique look into the life of a school counselor. One of the things that I can tell you, and our DFS people are no different, they see things and hear things and know things about our community that everyone in this room wishes did not exist in our communities. Many of us just don't even want to believe the things that go on in our communities. There is a very close working relationship. I can only speak for Powell. I am assuming that it is across the entire state, but very close working relationship with DFS and law enforcement in almost all of these cases. They have wraparound meetings, oftentimes weekly meetings where they're talking about certain kids that are, in the system, so to speak, or headed for the system.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you consider a part of the Project Aware, or, I mean, I know that sort of goes on in a way, but have you encompassed it together, kind of all as a part of the everybody involved solution? Is it?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I would not consider it part of Project Aware per se, because those systems have been in place long predating. I don't think our relationship is any better or any worse today with DFS than it was 20 years ago. I think there's always been a pretty close hand-in-hand relationship between DFS and school systems in the state of Wyoming.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. At this point, is there any other further public comment on this topic? Any further public comment? on
Mr.
this
Chairman.
Topic?
Kelly Bridges is online and would like to provide public comment on this.
Who?
Kelly Bridges.
Okay, put him on, quick.
Hello.
Her, okay,
Yes. Thank you, Mr.
Ah.
Chairman.
go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Kelly Bridges, and I'm a mother of young children and an attorney, and I have a slightly different perspective to offer today to the committee. I understand it's been a long day, and I'll make my comments as short as possible. First off, I'm concerned that these mental health programs we've been talking about today smack of a federal solution to a Wyoming problem. Wyoming has taken federal money to implement at least 2 broad and sweeping statewide mental health programs in our schools, Project Aware and Thrive. These programs started as pilot programs using federal money, and then the legislature will be asked to fund these programs statewide. We should be skeptical of the agenda that comes with federal money and concentrate on creating solutions from Wyoming that will work for Wyoming students. Second, and to that end, We should focus on common sense activities that provide kids with purpose, camaraderie, accomplishment like sports, learning skills, working, and doing good for others. Activities like these instill gratitude for life and connection to community and provide the satisfaction of helping others. These activities get kids away from screens as well. Some people may scoff at this because it does not involve a cadre of experts, but it is true and it works. These activities provide kids with achievement and accomplishment that give them the confidence and provide happiness. Telling children that they have mental health problems and miring them in narcissism and self-doubt is destructive. Policies that promote this are destructive to our youth. Accepting federal money to promote this is destructive to our state. Just last year, our own school district here decided that it did not have the money to have a girls softball team or an FFA program, despite repeated requests and imploring parents and significant interest from students. These activities are in the best interest of our students, but the districts claim they do not have enough money for them. Meanwhile, the district is implementing mental health programs and hiring new counselors. The parents whom I know would like our schools to recognize the importance and support these types of common sense activities instead of promoting the notion that all students have mental health problems and need daily or weekly government interventions. Third, the legislature just passed legislation that emphasized the importance of parental rights, specifically regarding mental health issues in schools. I'm concerned the message has not been received. The state continues to press forward with these mental health programs, yet at the same time have acknowledged in other meetings that parents reject them at a fairly high rate and don't want their children involved in them. In one breath, I've heard Wyoming administrators and legislators pay what seems to be lip service to parents' rights, but in the next breath, lament that parents are not, quote unquote, engaged enough for these programs to work. What they mean is programs won't work unless they are universally mandated for all students. So the program that may start as an opt-in for parents oftentimes becomes an opt-out because without mandating it for all students, there's not enough participation to justify the existence of a program that has already been implemented statewide for millions and millions of dollars. All of this begs the question, why are we implementing these mental health programs when we do not know how many parents and students will participate statewide? The legislature should ask the question why our state always turns to federal grant money and out-of-state vendors like BARR for solutions, and if their constituents would support it if they knew about it. The parents and community members whom I know are shocked to learn that these mental health programs have been implemented in Wyoming schools and they don't support it. Based on my research, BARR does not represent Wyoming values. Its core value is equity, not equality, and it is endorsed by CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. CASEL focuses on transformative social emotional learning, focusing on equity and social justice, which essentially wraps critical race theory and other oppressed philosophies into SEL curriculum. I implore the legislatures on this education committee to research the organizations and vendors such as CASEL, AIR, and BARR that are being pushed on Wyoming schools. Legislators should be skeptical and ask questions about these programs. Are there downsides to the mental health programs? Does anyone have criticisms or negative stories? What do parents think of them? Does a program like BARR promote the school staff as trusted adults to the detriment of parents? Are the relationships they are developing with students the role of the school? Are there medical privacy and confidentiality concerns with sharing so much information? And finally, how can a school implement BARR if parents don't consent to it? These are just some of the questions that need to be asked. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Questions? Questions? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the testimony. Anybody else? Anybody else? With that, we're going to proceed to the section on career and technical education. Matt, you have a few things for us? Oh, excuse me just a minute. Chris, you're supposed to remind me you've got a bill.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a bill idea.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think for the next meeting, it would be helpful to draft legislation to put together perhaps a pilot program for several years where we take the 6 to 10 largest districts, so we can do that through setting an enrollment threshold at 2,000 or 3,000 students and direct those districts over that period of time to implement a Medicaid reimbursement program consistent with our discussions and provide staff flexibility to draft that legislation. I think it would also be important to include a little bit of language regarding Medicaid fraud and put protections in to ensure that our school districts are not afraid that they're going to be prosecuted for Medicaid fraud if they screw things up a little bit. So having the largest districts, and I think that's something for us to talk about. If it's 3,000 level, we get the 6 largest districts, which is about half of the state. If we go to 2,000, that's about 2/3 of the districts, population, excuse me, 2/3 of the population of the state. And I think it's 10 or 12 districts. So I think either of those sizes would be good. But that's the concept is to start off with the largest districts that represent the most amount of money and get it right before we move to all of the districts.
Let me, on that, you need a definite number, use 2,500 and give us a list of the districts with enrollment so we can look for a breakpoint that makes sense. Does that give you enough to draft a bill, Tanya? Okay, and this is a serious objection to the committee. I'm going to ask that bill be drafted to be available for the next meeting and get distributed ahead of time so we get some reaction, particularly from the school districts. Okay, Representative Allred, you had a.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to hear, I understand there were 5 pilot districts and only 1 we've heard from. I would like to hear why the other 4 didn't follow through. I want to hear from the districts that have been trying to do that and why they haven't, along with what has, I want to see.
Yeah. I don't think there's ever really been more than a request for volunteers from the districts, and we've got the one. And I think what you'll find is if we draft a bill, we'll hear from those districts. But I'm very much with you that we want to hear from the districts as to what they're doing.
Mr. Chairman, I will reach out to those 4 districts and have them provide a response to the committee and before the next meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Does that satisfy? Okay. Seeing no objection, we'll do that on the career and technical.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, again, Matt Wilmarth, Senior School Finance Analyst with the LSO. I won't belabor a lot of this. It's written for you. Really, some of it is duplicative of some of the presentations behind me, so I don't want to steal their thunder. These are their programs that they administer, but I want to provide you a little bit of underpinning of where the K-12 funding model resources come from, and then some of the recent programs that have been implemented, as well as some historical programs that have been in place for many years. So I'll touch on each of those briefly. If you have questions, feel free to interrupt me and I'll try to address those. Generally, for the K-12 funding model, the legislature, as part of its response to the school finance litigation cases, has separately allocated additional resources for career technical education. And those come in 2 forms. One, additional CTE teachers and additional CTE equipment, supplies, and materials. The base resources for CTE teachers comes from the allocation of specialist or elective teachers in the K-12 funding model. And those are resourced through a percentage of the core teachers that are allocated to secondary schools. And for secondary schools, a class size of 21 generates 1 teacher. And then 33% is provided of that FTE is provided for specialist teachers. And then districts have the ability through their block grant to allocate is what they see fit for career technical education. In 2003-4 school year, in part of its initial response to the Campbell cases, the litigation, the legislature had a study done and provided additional CTE teachers to lower the class sizes of career and technical education. The average class size in secondary schools was a little over 16 students, and they found that career and technical education classes were about 13. So that 29% is informed from that 2002 study by MGT. Or sorry, MPR and Associates, not MGT. That's School Capital Construction. So that's where this 29% weight comes from. It's been in place since school year 2003-4. And that report also required districts, and part of the requirements of receiving these additional resources is that districts must offer these career and technical education courses in a sequence of 3 courses, meaning that they have a natural progression of complexity to be provided to students. So they have a growth in that class. On page 2, table 1 illustrates a prototypical size school and how the model allocates these core teachers, specialist teachers, additional CTE teachers. But we also offer, or not we offer, but the formula provides minimum teacher resources in schools. And at secondary level, junior high schools are provided a minimum of 8 teachers, but really where this focus on CTE is in the high schools or grades 9 through 12. And schools receive a minimum of 10 teachers. So if you look at table 1, the block grant model in a prototypical school of 105 ADM would receive 5 core teachers, 1.65 specialist teachers or elective teachers. That's the 33%. And then let's say 12% of their 9 through 12 ADM is enrolled in these CTE courses. They receive an additional 70.77 FTE, but then to ensure that they have 10 total teachers to offer the basket of goods, they are awarded 2.58 additional teachers. So they get that 10 teacher minimum. And you can see the other prototypical size schools. The one minimum or additional minimum teachers I forgot to include in this memo was we also have a small school district adjustment for any district that's 243 ADM or less. We ensure that for every grade, they have 1 student in, that they get at least 1 core teacher plus the specialist teacher percentage. So there's additional resources that are provided for small school districts on top of these small school adjustments. On figure 1 on page 3, I just wanted to provide some historical CTE, FTE enrollments. It so happens last school year in 22-23, that was the highest year since the data collections have occurred that we've seen CTE enrollment. So students have enrolled in more on an FTE basis in CTE courses. Last year was the highest on record since collecting this data in the same manner. Over time, that on a percentage basis, when you compare that to the grade 9 through 12 ADM, it's ranged from 10 to 12, or sorry, I think it's like 13%. So it's pretty steady across those years. As I mentioned, the supplies materials are also provided on top of the normal distribution of school supplies and materials for students. CTE has additional supplies provided on the basis of the 9 through 12 CTE teachers that teach these sequenced courses. For next school year, districts will receive $14,185 per CTE teacher. This is for them to purchase the high-tech equipment or replace those pieces of equipment, which are much more expensive than the normal school supplies that are provided. And you can see the historical trend of how much is allocated for that per teacher amount. I will say in the 2005 recalibration, there was a change. I want to be transparent on how the formula works. There was a change that prior to then, a school district received a minimum of a 2-program amount, meaning the per teacher amount of a little over 6,000 in 2003-04. A school district, regardless of their amount allocated under that CTE teacher, received at least a little over 12,000. So if you're looking for a policy option, that may be to revert back to that 2-program minimum. But again, that'd be a little over, just under 30,000 for districts that do participate in reporting their data. The charts on page 4 just show historical CTE teacher FTEs. I don't necessarily need to get into that. It has decreased over time in both secondary and grades 9 through 12, and then secondary in total. Secondary includes both middle and junior high schools and high schools. Figure 4 just illustrates that this most recent school year, about $7.8 million of additional funding targeted for CTE has been awarded, and you can see that again over time. Let's talk about some non-block grant allocations, or I can pause there if there are any specific questions.
Your office.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Is there any kind of overarching reason why it ended up going up by about $1 million total between the supplies and additional teachers between the 22-23 and 23-24 school year? Is that inclusive maybe of the grant program that we created, or I'm just trying to look for a reason why that's a pretty substantial increase, which is great, but I'm curious if we know why.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, twofold. First is the enrollment in CTE courses increased, which increased the additional teachers.
Yeah.
But also on top of that, the legislature provided an ECA on top of the salaries awarded for that. So there's that compounding effect of additional teachers and the increased ECA for those teachers. That really drove the increase from year over year.
Between the two. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Let me ask one question. You mentioned a 3-course or 3-year sequence. That's not statutory, is it?
Mr. Chairman, it is, and it's been that way since the inception.
How
So,
do we
so
square
Mr.
that
Chairman,
with some programs need more time than others do.
Mr. Chairman, I'd have to go back to the original report to understand the sequencing on that. And I think the Department of Education might be able to lay more foundation on that. But I think it's to ensure that those programs are carried out with fidelity, that you're just not doing a single, computer science course, and that then the student doesn't have any follow through on that.
Well, let me explain the nature of my concern. Maybe the State Department can deal with it. I had a niece who needed CTE. What she did was take a course in high school through the community college that gave her the skills to be a CNA, which led to immediate employment. That being an occupation in considerable demand. But it was less than a year's course. It was, I think, almost less than a semester course. How do we accommodate that sort of thing that does lead to employment with a statutory 3-year requirement? There's something here that I just don't understand.
Mr. Chairman, it's not a 3-year, it's a 3-course. And so that may be a year and a half. I don't know how districts actually carry out that requirement. Again, I leave it to the Department of Education to really delve into that.
Okay, well, leave it.
And briefly on that, there's the concentrator concept that's important as a theme in CTE, and we'll probably have somebody come talk about that. But that's one of the core philosophies, and that's why you have to have concentrations so that you have the continuity I know that's underlies a lot of the grants and a lot of the way the program works as well as the success for it. The other thing I'll notice is I think you mentioned that your niece took a college course, went to the college. That would be 2 semesters of high school typically, even if it was 1 semester at the,
It was less than 1 semester.
it was okay, it was shorter, but the college courses are typically the equivalent of 2 semesters at high school.
And Mr. Chairman, the sequencing of 3, and I've quoted the language, it's 21, 12, 10, I think it's 105, requires, or maybe it's 30, it's now in 309, sorry, subset or paragraph V or 5, subparagraph D, but it says that in an occupational area or career cluster that provides a student with a technical knowledge, skills, or proficiency necessary to obtain employment in current or emerging occupations to pursue advanced skill training. So the requirement is for that,
What was
employment.
that statute?
It's 2113-309, subsection M, paragraph 5, subparagraph D. So MVD.
Okay, let's move on from that.
So outside of the block grant, the legislature has now created 2 separate grant programs that school districts can tap into regarding career technical education project funding. The first has been in existence also since the 2003-04 school year. This is the demonstration project grant that provides a school district the ability to receive up to $350,000 over a 2-year period to fund expenses with planning, developing or implementing a new or expansion of an existing CTE program. And this has, again, been in existence since the 2003-04 school year. It historically has been funded at approximately $500,000 per biennium. And then in the 2009-10 biennium, there was a one-time appropriation of an additional $810,000. Recently, in the past 2 biennia, that's been reduced, actually 3 biennia, it's been reduced due to budget cuts. So another policy option would be to enhance the budget amount, which would provide more opportunities for school districts to participate. And then 2 years ago, 2 sessions ago, in the 2023 session, the legislature implemented a career and technical education supplies and materials grant, which is if you're not participating in the demonstration grant, you're eligible to participate in this grant, and it provides additional supplies and materials funding for large purchases, as long as based on a 5-year average, you're expending your block grant dollars. And that has been awarded initially at $250,000 for 1 year, and then it biennializes to $500,000. So in total, there's just under $1 million available for additional CTE grants to school districts. So again, another policy option would be to enhance those appropriations if you're looking to target CTE funding. In addition, just to the state funding, there is federal Perkins funding that I'll leave to the Department of Education to explain, but big picture, there's about, I think it's just under 10 million or maybe a little bit over 10 million per year or biennium that can be awarded to community colleges and school districts. And it's about a 60-40 split in the state of Wyoming, 60% going to school districts, 40% going to community colleges. 2 other quick programs that have been initiated on a statewide basis is the Wyoming Works program. This was a program really targeted at the community college level, where it provided equipment grants. There was a $2 million set aside for community colleges to access equipment and setting up programs. And then a little over $3 million set aside for student grants. All of that equipment money has been exhausted, expended, and there is approximately $411,000 left in student grants available to community colleges. Most recently, that you're probably more familiar with, is the Wyoming Innovation Program, the WIP program that's housed within the governor's office. The legislature has appropriated $55 million for that, $42.5 million from the general fund and 12.5 million from the American Rescue Plan Act direct funds. And that's an initiative that's being undertaken by the governor's office to connect the University of Wyoming, community colleges, and school districts on projects to improve the economy and workforce in Wyoming. Also within the Department of Education, again, this is part of their presentation, so I won't spend too much time, but what I will highlight is the Department of Education's budget since the at least I can go back to the 2007-8 biennium, contains specific funding for career technical student organizations. And those are 5 specific organizations that have been awarded stipends for their associations and their state level directors that coordinate activities across schools. And the Department of Education has specific amounts within their general fund budget to make awards to those associations or organizations. The legislature and the governor's office, the legislature appropriated an additional $425,000 this past session to enhance that budget, or sorry, it's $450,000 to enhance that budget over the next biennium. And that was contained in the inflationary section of the budget bill. The Department of Education will explain how they're allocating those funds. Finally, kind of on the historical aspect of what's available to school districts and community colleges are these concepts of BOCES, or Board of Cooperative Educational Services. There are 34 school districts and 6 community college districts that have assessed mill levies historically to provide partnerships across districts and community college districts to offer dual and concurrent enrollment programs. Senator Scott, that's probably one of the courses your niece took.
Yes, it was.
So these aren't specifically targeted towards career and technical education, but they do use these partnerships to provide career and technical education. These have been in place since 1969. So as of the 2023-24 school year, again, 34 school districts, 6 community colleges assess mill levies specifically for these partnerships. Additionally, 2 unique mill levies that's still on the books is the Adult Education Program mill levy. Up to 2.5 mills can be assessed on a school district's assessed valuation for additional funding for these types of programs. The 2 school districts that have assessed these mills is in Carbon County School District number 1 and in Fremont County School District number 2. Carbon County School District number 1 assesses a 1.5 mill levy, and as does Fremont County School District number 2. The one unique thing about this is there's no direction to the school districts or the electorate to go reauthorize these. And I brought this concept 2 years ago to this committee that you may want to provide some direction to reauthorize these mill levies. Carbon County School Districts was assessed in the 2000 general election, never been reauthorized, but it just still gets assessed. But it's at the option of the school district. In 2006 general election, Fremont 2 made the same decision to provide up to 2 mills, and they have most recently assessed 1.5 mills. Again, that's just one option of a policy consideration. Finally, on the expenditures, page 8 and page 9 of your issue brief really demonstrate there has been not much movement in terms of percentage on expenditures. School districts report these the grades 9 through 12 career technical education expenditures on a specific expenditure code to the Department of Education. Going back to the 2008-9 school year, about 1.6 to 1.7% of their operating expenditures are directly attributable to career and technical education. If it's recorded, if they do provide programs in their elementary or junior high or middle school, it's just recorded as a elementary or middle or junior high school expenditure. There is not a separate breakout or expenditure function for career technical education. Table 2 in on page 9 just breaks that out. Where does the money get expended? Primarily in salaries and benefits, as one would anticipate. About 80 to 85% of those expenditures occur in the salaries and benefits area. With that, Mr. Chairman, the appendices just provide school district level details. So you can find your favorite district and look at all those data elements. So with that, Mr. Chairman, be happy to address any more questions.
Representative Overby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the WIP program, is your understanding that that's a follow-on to the Wyoming Works program, or does that have a different mission?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Obermuller, I would maybe defer that to the governor's office. I think they're similar, but I think different administrations.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, my schedule shows we got the PTSB. PTSB, are you here? Come forward.
Good afternoon, Chairman Scott, members of the committee. My name is Brendan O'Connor. I'm the Executive Director of the Professional Teaching Standards Board, and I appreciate the opportunity to present before you today. I would like to provided both the presentation and a written memo, and I'd like to just go through the presentation itself. The memo has some additional information that I can refer to and answer questions to, but the overall presentation will help with all of our licensing pieces, of which career technical education is part of it. Okay, so the one way to get licensed in Wyoming, the most popular way or the most familiar way for most individuals is what we call a traditional route. And that is someone who's gone through a bachelor's or master's degree program at a university specifically for education. And that's what we heard earlier today and perhaps later this afternoon from the University of Wyoming. What we receive in our office is an institutional recommendation from those institutions that attest that the individual has gone through the program, has completed all requirements, and has met all licensure requirements as well. And like I said, it's typically undergrad or graduate programs. There are a number of alternate routes to licensure. Some of those are associated with universities and colleges, some are not. These do not always have to be a degree granting. It could be a certificate program. We heard a little bit about those earlier today with the reading certificate program. PTSB does recognize some out of state. Wyoming doesn't have an alt route in state. UW does have a post-baccalaureate certificate program that we do recognize. But these other programs typically are a little less in length than going through a college program. So you can typically finish in, depending on the type of program, within 12 months to 18 months instead of 2 years or more. Specifically tied to career and tech education, PTSB has had the professional industry career permit for, in one name or the other, for probably over our entire existence of 30 years plus. And this allows individuals who don't have an education background, but do have technical experience in different careers to come into, be hired by school districts to teach in those areas. And primarily they have been, historically, I should say, they've been in more what we would call the trades or vocational, as the old term would be, those type of programs. For example, the example I often use is welding. I don't know, I haven't researched it, but I don't think you can get a bachelor's degree in welding, but you can get like an associate's degree, and then you can also have years and years of experience that you can bring into the classroom and help those students. And then while you're on this permit, you're doing professional development about how do I be a better teacher at it? I'm bringing in my content knowledge from my career experience. Now, how do I translate that information to the students that I'm working with? And over the past few years, our board has allowed some more flexibility for districts to use this permit for what we would say outside of trades types of things. We do have some instances of where, for example, a veterinarian has come in and taught some animal science and biology classes part-time in the school districts. We had some college professors that have come back and worked at K-12. You do not have to be certified to teach at a university. You do in the K-12 system. Most of these individuals have doctorate degrees, and they don't appreciate when we say, you need to go back to school to learn how to be a teacher. They'd say, no, I don't think so. So we've been able to work that in this way. This is the only route that they would have available for them to come in. We've had some lawyers as well come in. The only degree requirements that we do have for the PIC are for agriculture and family, consumer sciences, and business. And those are at the bachelor's level. Typically, those are also very broad categories. Family and consumer sciences, you've got the food and culinary pieces, you have child development pieces, you have fashion, you have sewing, you have interior and exterior design. They're pretty broad in those areas. So some people coming in on a PIC permit may have that. They might only have the culinary piece, and then they would be limited to just doing the culinary. They would not be able to do interior design. You know, if I've been a cook or a chef somewhere for 20 years, I might not know how to make a nice arrangement of my living room or something. Also, over the last number of years, we've allowed an avenue for PIC permits to get transitioned to a standard license. So when I talked about the traditional route, the bachelor, master's degree, that ends up with a standard teaching license. The PIC permit is a permit. It is a little bit more limited in what you can do and the types of endorsements that you can add to it. You would have to have that work experience in those other areas in order to add to a PIC permit. For the standard license, you can take some additional courses, you can go through programs. There's more opportunities to add endorsements in other content areas. And so you see in the kind of arrow bullets, the 4 classes that we require PIC permit holders to take and complete to transition to a standard license. And these are very typical of foundational classes found in most ed prep programs across the nation. So it puts everyone kind of at the same level. And again, gives the PIC permit, former PIC permit holders opportunities to even go into administration if they have a bachelor's degree and eligible to get into a master's program for administration, where that would be limited if they were just on the PIC permit. Other ways that we allow educators to get into our classrooms are called exception authorizations. Now, all of these do require a bachelor's degree to begin with, not necessarily in education, could be in any number of content areas. It does allow the individual to be working as a teacher while they are taking courses or finishing one of those alt-route programs or a program at the University of Wyoming to actually earn full licensure. And these have been, we've been issuing more of these exceptions over the last number of years, both for fully licensed teachers who are working or adding endorsements, but also for people coming in outside of education to become teachers. And they are supervised by licensed individuals and kind of overseen and supported in those school districts. I'm not going to read this list to you, but our exception authorization number 2 is program completion. We issue the most of our exceptions in this area. And so that is, again, a person who is going through a program either to become a teacher or who's already a teacher who's adding additional endorsement areas. This would be true in CTE areas as well, if they're eligible for that. We have a number of different permits. The PIC permit is one of these categories. Again, they're limited. as for example, in this list, coaches or substitutes, driver's education, so forth. So, and again, you see the professional industry career permit is one of our most popular permits, actually. We, other than substitutes, we probably have more subs and more coaches than we have individuals on PIC permits, but subs and coaches are more part-time and very transitory, so to speak. Just a quick recap of the way a traditional route works. You go through the degree program, you complete the background check, you get licensed. Similarly with the alternative routes, there are some alternative routes that are not associated with higher ed, and our board has been a little more hesitant about issuing some of these. So we've created some options in the exception authorizations that allow the individual, if they've gone through one of these, to successfully complete a couple of evaluations in their school district, and then the school district is then saying, yes, this person is a qualified person eligible for a standard license. And then the last three charts are just as of the day that I provided this to the LSO office. These are the number of active CTE endorsements on standard licenses. So these are fully licensed teachers. I believe in the other material I provided, that business education, there's 186 individuals holding a business education endorsement on a license. Now, we license individuals. We don't know if they're employed other than those on exception authorizations, because that's a verification. We check on that. So there's a number of people who hold these endorsements. I work with our partners at WDE to say, you know, is this person still actively employed? Are they recently retired? Have they been retired for a long time, but keeping their license active? So that's, I'm going to kind of put that context out there as well. That it's not that there's necessarily all of these teachers actively working right now in our classes, but they are available.
Quick question, what's the process for maintaining that licensure for a PIC?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Rothfuss, for that question. I did fail to say that. For permits, for all of our license types, we do have renewal requirements. And so for a standard educator license, also for the PIC permit, it's good for 5 years. You have to complete 5 PTSB credits or 5 college credits for its renewal. And as long as you maintain it, you can maintain it as long as you would like.
Proceed.
Okay. Thank you. This shows similarly all of those on PIC permits who are currently active. It's the time of this presentation. So health sciences, we have a great number. Again, we've got a high number of business and management individuals as well. And then the last slide is exception authorization specific to CTE areas. We issue a lot more for special education and for elementary education, but for the purposes of this topic, I just selected those. And you see that we have a number of individuals on exception authorizations earning licensure or endorsements in computer science primarily. And we do have a couple in agriculture and, you know, business and so forth. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
I'm going to ask one general one. You know, we're in the business of writing laws. Are there any changes we need to make to your governing laws that would enable you to make sensible use out of some of the resources we have in the community, people with quite a bit of knowledge that that don't have the qualifications to get some of your other programs? Are there some places where we could loosen things up and get some people that'd be really valuable to our students? And let me say, I'll ask you the same question of you and pose that same question to anybody that follows you that has an answer to it.
Thank you, Chairman Scott. I would say most of the individuals that you would be talking about, if they've got at least 2 years of work experience, we can get them in on that PIC permit. Or we do have one in the list called a consultant specialist permit. That one is, the district is vouching for that individual, saying they've got a lot of these unique qualities, and we will support them and work with them to make sure that they're successful with students. So I feel our board has done a lot of work over the last number of years to allow for more flexibility for hiring for districts and for allowing more eligibility for individuals who are interested in becoming teachers to get into education.
Your office.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is a little bit nuanced, but it came from a question actually at the CTE fair the other day, the idea where we have professionals that would be coming in on PIC permits that might have extensive experience in field. Let's say they're a welder for 30 years. So they couldn't be any better at welding, and they have a tremendous number of certifications and training and skill. We tend to be used to in the K-12 education system and in our licensure process, credentials, which are based on your degrees, right? What degrees you have. And those end up on file with the licensure. But we don't necessarily have a good way, to my knowledge, to bring in those types of accreditations that aren't traditional educational accreditations. Do you think that's something that should be handled and addressed from the PTSB side of things, or is that something where each district is better off figuring out how they would recognize and acknowledge that expertise within their own realm? Because I can see some merit on both sides of that in recognition, so that there's validity to a salary commensurate with their experience in field, as opposed to what we typically use, which would be number of credits, number of years in teaching, those kinds of things. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Chairman Scott, thank you, Senator Rothfuss. I can't speak to the salary question because that's out of my purview. But myself, on behalf of the agency, I've been working with a national group called DigiLearn about micro-credentialing and using those for both professional development and for adding endorsements and so forth. I could see a similar type of comparable use of, say, industry certifications that would show that they've completed something, especially if they're coming in with it, but if they're maintaining it, we could count those towards professional development credits for renewal credits of that license. I think that would be, for what we could do, yes, and I believe our board is open enough to considering those types of things. Again, salary is a different matter, and so I have my own opinions about that, what could be done, but since I'm not in a position to do that, I don't feel I should say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Next, we've got, and we'll go through and hear from the State Department of Education, and then we're going to take a break. So State Department of Education, you're next.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Wanda Maloney, and I am with the Department of Education.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Lahip, and I'm with the Department of Education as well.
Good afternoon, committee. I'm not with the Department of Education. I'm Mark Mathern. I'm the vice chair for the State Department, or the Wyoming State Board of Career and Technical Education. We also function as the State Board of Education.
Mr. Chairman, this afternoon, we're excited to be here. We really have been partners in looking at career and technical education. Our state superintendent has prioritized it in her strategic plan, and we have many updates that we'd like to share with you. We have been asked to share about programs of study. We'll also look at CTSOs. We'll delve a little bit into the funding in terms of state funding and our federal funding. And then finally, we do have some statutory recommendations that we would like to share, and then wrap everything up with just some partnerships that are happening across the state. So our next slide really looks at programs of study. So what is a program of study? We talked a little bit earlier about sequenced courses, and really those courses are aligned to standards. And they also outline the academic and technical skills that a student would need. And there's many other things. There's entry points and exit points, but some of the other indicators that we know about high quality programs is they have student assessment embedded within them. They also have work-based learning opportunities where kids not only learn the content, but they're able to experience it in an authentic way. Career and technical student organizations, we'll talk a little bit later about that, but many of those are embedded into the programs of study. Again, building leadership opportunities for students as they go through the courses. And then another key component with a program of study is making sure that there are business and community partnerships that are engaged in this work. Some of the examples that we see at the secondary level, construction pathways, engineering and technology, restaurant management are some of the popular programs of study across the state. Within our post-secondary, we see business administration, an electrician pathway, and registered nursing as popular pathways. I want to move into the data. This is pretty exciting when we look at both the left side of the graphic and the right side of the graphic. I want to talk first about the right side of the graphic that really highlights the number of industry recognized credentials. And really, programs of study have industry recognized credentials within them too. They have opportunities for kids to learn and be able to apply that. So Senator Scott, as you talked about your niece, one of the things that she left is with a credential. So what an opportunity to be able to go out and use that skill immediately and have that. When we look at that number of 3,199, if we go back 2 years during the year 2020-21, we recognize that we only saw about 1,700 students earning those industrial recognized credentials. The following year, we had almost 1,000 more students that were engaged in getting these credentials. And then finally, our most recent data reflects over 3,000 students. And we see that happening for a number of reasons. One of them, we recognize that our teachers are more comfortable with embedding them into the courses, and it becomes the way we do business because they recognize that students need to have these skills, and leaving with that does make them more employable. We also have included this in our accountability model. So when we look at career readiness, that is one measurement that can be used. Some of the most common industry recognized credentials that we're seeing across our schools are OSHA 10, American Hotel and Lodging Association, computer science related micro-credentials, and then the ASK certification, which is really business and marketing. We also want to recognize that our students that are engaged in 2 courses, and you'll see this, a concentrator is really a program of study, and a student would complete 2 of those courses to be defined as a concentrator. And programs of study can have more than 2 courses. They could have 3 or 4, and then the districts determine at what point that student becomes the concentrator. I just want to highlight, if we can go back just one moment, the graduation rate. And you've probably heard this statistic before, but recognizing that those students that are concentrators, that do complete those courses, do have a much higher rate of graduation as compared even to our state graduation. So pretty exciting figures there. As we move to the next graphic, on the far right, we just want to highlight the work that our career and technical student organizations are doing. We have over 6,000 students that are participating in them, and you'll notice the number of chapters too, a fair amount of chapters that are happening across the state. We also keep track of some of our top CTE programs of study. And in Wyoming, one of the things that we notice is that the ag-related fields are top programs of study. And they may be broken out more specifically in terms of specific courses. And I don't know, yes, we did highlight on the post-secondary, we have both agriculture, and then on the secondary, we don't call it agricultural, but you'll see there's specific programs of studies that are highlighted. We'll move on. When we look at funding, and Mr. Wilmarth did carry and cover a lot of information about funding, but we are supported by really two primary streams, looking at state level funding and then also federal funding. And I just have an update to this slide. When we look at all districts being eligible, not all districts do utilize the federal funding, but we are seeing an increase in the number that are participating in that. Currently, we have no BOCES that have contacted us to request funding, but we did have a charter school. Prairie View did reach out to us, and they were interested in learning more about how they could access the funding.
On the federal funding side, one of the things that we've heard is that the Perkins process has become so difficult that unless you really have somebody who can spend full time for a week on it, you don't apply, which is why our smaller schools don't have the resources. Some of our largest schools are still able to do that. And I think that's the reason we're struggling with some of our federal funding, particularly at those smaller schools. Has there been any discussion at the state level of trying to find ways to create shortcuts in that process for our schools and our school districts so that they don't have to do all the work and the heavy lifting internally, because we probably have grant writing experts throughout the state where they don't have them in all the school districts? Is that a conversation we're having?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, absolutely. You know, I think one of the strategic plans initiatives were very intent on reducing the burden. But I know, as having worked at the state, or not the state level, but at a curriculum position, I did fill out the Perkins plan, and it is a heavy lift. I think some of the conversations that we're having is working to potentially pre-populate some of that data, and I think it would be worth having a task force and talking through what is creating the biggest burden and what can we address to simplify that application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Real quick, Senator, I know from our district, and I got this information from my assistant superintendent who fills out the Perkins grant. He says he spent 100 hours on the grant for a $70,000 grant. And you won. Okay.
Mr. Chairman. And I think the key is I have not filled one out. I don't understand why it's burdensome and what those aspects are, and whether it's data gathering or whether it's writing narratives. So maybe we do need to understand that a little bit better. And as you said, if there's ways that at the state level or through some cooperation, we can pre-populate as much of that as possible so that it is just down to writing a few narrative points about, I need this equipment so that I can teach this, one afternoon and I'm done. That would certainly help our school districts. And, but I look forward to hearing back and hearing more about that.
Certainly, and Mr. Chairman, Senator, if I could, there is an option in the Perkins plan that districts and post-secondaries can form consortiums. And we do have some of the smaller districts, for example, Fremont 24.
Can you speak closer to the microphone?
You bet, sorry. And we do have two in specific smaller districts, Fremont 24 and Washakie 2 are just an example of two districts who have entered into that consortium so that they can share not only their resources, but the funding and such.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'll continue. So when we look at funding on the federal partners, I think we can move to the next slide. So when we look at federal funding, the Carl D. Perkins is really supporting both academic and career technical skills. And it supports, this is the one grant at the department that covers both secondary and post-secondary. We don't have any other grant that reaches into the post-secondary. And so as we look at the funding, one of the things that we look strategically at is how can we reduce some of the burden for our districts? And we are continuing to streamline, as I said, in asking some of the things that we are doing. We also looked at the federal requirements. So previously, they had to have programs of study that aligned to high wage, high skill, and in demand. And actually, the federal partners only require one of those. And so we have scaled that back to only require one of those. And that leaves some leverage for districts too. They can continue to keep the two indicators, but they certainly can only use one if they so choose. One of the other things we heard loud and clear was really the benefit of externships, but then we heard about the hardships that some of our teachers had in doing externships outside of their regular hours. And so in hearing that, we pulled together stakeholders. We had a sub-cabinet committee with the superintendent strategic plan. We did listening sessions and we made that optional. So that's no longer a requirement. But if teachers so choose to do that, they would still have that benefit to be able to do that. And then they could also get paid for the time that they are engaging at that work. One of the last things that we did was streamlined really the teacher recertification. So all teachers every 5 years have to recertify. At one time, we did have a higher bar for our CTE teachers. That is now back in alignment with all other teachers. So that was also a request and something that we did to streamline.
In your office?
On the Perkins grant, how are the funds decided at the federal level? And what I'm really getting at is how much are we currently getting relative to what we potentially could get if we did everything as well as we could as a state?
Mr. Chairman, I think we are going there next. So Senator, if you could stay tight, we'll be moving into that next.
All right, actually, yes, that was a great leeway. Thank you. So you'll see here for the upcoming year, this is an annual figure. It's $5.9 million. The Perkins funding at the federal level is based on both enrollment and then also poverty level and things of that nature. So it is calculated at the federal level. And our state is one of the very few that are actually minimally funded at the federal level. I will point that out. Of that 5.9 million, you'll see that 70% goes directly to the LEAs. And in this case, it is both secondary and post-secondary, so school districts and community colleges. Of that 70% that is given to those LEAs, 60% is given to school districts and 40% is divided amongst the post-secondaries. 15% we have a set aside for cutting edge grants, and this is where Perkins funded districts and LEAs can apply for grants and receive extra funding at the federal level for their initiatives. The remaining 15%, 5% will be a state set aside for admin, and the remaining 10% is then divvied up amongst leadership funds and other things such as non-traditional areas. From there, we'll move into the state funding overview. And I know Mr. Wilmarth touched on this earlier. And so we really have three different areas that our department utilizes for state funding. And the first is maintenance of effort. Out of that area, the career and technical student organizations are funded. And I will go into further information regarding that in future slides. We have model funding and then the state grants. So this is the model funding for the 22-23 school year. And I will point out that the model funding allotted $6.4 roughly million for the additional CTE teachers and the supplies and materials. And I will notate that the statewide district general fund CTE expenditures were roughly 27.9 million. And so Wyoming school districts did spend about 21.5 million in excess of their additional model funding for CTE programs during the 22-23 school year. Regarding the state-funded grants, the first grant is the equipment grant. That is the newest grant, and that is $500,000 per biennium. The second grant is a demonstration grant, and that provides $425,000 per biennium. You can see up there the purposes for each of those grants. For example, the equipment grant is to fund the purchase of supplies and materials. Some examples of funding that took place within the last year were funding for industrial arts, updating agricultural programs, and a greenhouse. For the demonstration grant, we did have schools that have funded irrigation systems, construction and manufacturing, and a construction trailer.
Just a quick question. Ms. LaHiff, curious, out of those, we have just underneath $1 million set aside for those grants. Here's your guys' requests on that $1 million.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
How much are the requests? What type of requests do you guys get on this that are unfunded?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown. It really ranges. The demonstration grant has parameters within statute that we can give out up to $150,000 the first year to a district and then $200,000 the second year. And so, I mean, it really kind of depends. I do know that, for example, this past year for Fremont 24, they requested $90,200 for a greenhouse, and we were able to award that. Moving into career and technical student organizations, these are nonprofit student organizations that prepare students for career-related areas. We, at the department and state level, fund 5 CTSOs, and that level of funding was increased from $30,000 annually to $60,000 annually in this last legislative session for each CTSO. And we also included in that legislative session an incentive bonus in the amount of $75,000. And each of those 5 organizations will receive a portion of that incentive funding annually based on their membership. The department does have contracts with each of those 5 CTSOs, which I will show on the next slide. But you'll see some of the requirements for those CTSOs include creating opportunities for middle school, junior high, and high school students to develop skills and create opportunities for leadership, amongst others. The 5 CTSOs that receive funding at the state level are DECA, FBLA, FCCLA, and FFA, and those members range from 209 all the way to 3,966. I will point out that there are additional CTSOs that exist and do contact the department for funding for other conferences and partnerships and support, and those include ProStart and Cyber Wyoming. And with that, I will turn it back over to Wanda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move into statutory recommendations. As we look at the 2 state-funded grants, we have 2, the demonstration grant and then the equipment grant. Our request would be to look at streamlining that and looking for some ways to consolidate that into one statute. The reason being is that we have just confusion about the timelines and some of the eligibility, and we certainly believe that the funding is still needed, but looking for ways to streamline those grants would further support our districts. Secondly, I would ask that you consider equalizing funding for our small districts and opportunities for our students. When we look at setting up a CTE program, one of the things we recognize is that they are expensive. Not only are they expensive, but we also want to look at the breadth and the scope of programs that kids have access to and opportunities to be engaged in. And when you look at smaller districts, they receive less funding. And so then offering more breadth and opportunities is challenging. One of the things we do know in our small districts, as the right teacher in the right place makes all the difference. They really can grow that. And looking at a community's strategic plan and their value does enhance those programs across the state. The last thing I would consider, ask for you to consider is incentive funding for collaborative efforts. When we see that districts are working and forming consortiums, or we see that districts are working with community colleges or the university, we'd like to look for ways to further incentivize that, because we realize that the money may go further, the opportunities for our students may go further, and we are seeing a lot more collaboration across the state, and it's really growing the opportunities for our CTE students.
Mr. Chairman, real quick, Representative Clouston has a question.
Okay. Representative, go ahead.
You are muted, Representative Clouston.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jennifer, you had mentioned that Wyoming was minimally funded federally compared to most other states. Could you just touch on that, why that is?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, Representative, it is a federal calculation that is based off of population and poverty level.
Okay. Proceed now. Okay. Senator Roberts.
I want to understand that a little bit more. So this 5.9 million, is it possible for us to get more than that? Or is, when you say it's the minimum, with states, sometimes we fall below it. So 5.9 is all we'll get, but that's the minimum they give states. So is it possible for us to get more than $5.9 million if we do things right?
Mr. Chairman and Senator, each year and historically, we have still seen an increase. It does depend on the federal government and what they're funding, if they're increasing their funding or not for the areas. But we have seen an increase. For example, last July 1, we were allocated roughly 5.8 million. So we do see a slight increase, but it's really based on those figures when they're doing their calculations.
So it's not based on anything we do. It's based on whatever they're calculating in DC on some spreadsheet.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that is correct. Yes.
Okay, so when we're talking about the grant applications for it and who's participating, it's a fixed pie of $5.9 million, and our districts are effectively, and schools are effectively competing for that $5.9 million.
Mr. Chairman and Senator, yes. And I will say that it does fluctuate, yearly. For example, this past year we had roughly, I believe, right around 37 districts receiving funds out of Perkins, and now we will have 41 who have opted to receive funds this coming year. So that fluctuation does also alter what districts may receive.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, do we use all $5.9 million or basically all of our allocation? We don't revert any, do we?
Mr. Chairman and Senator, we do make every effort to use all of it, yes.
Does that mean that we don't revert any, or does that mean that we try real hard?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, we have reverted funding in the past, but we do make every effort and we have processes in place to ensure that if districts aren't able to utilize everything, we can reallocate it within the time frame.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to go back to the recommendations slide there. And you talked a little bit about the timelines, and I've actually heard some input about that. And so could you elaborate just a little bit more on how you would adjust those timelines, how you would maybe streamline those together perhaps? I'd like to hear that, because that's a common complaint concerning that, that I don't even really understand fully, but it's a complaint.
Chairman and Representative Lawley, I would agree, and I'm going to defer that. Jennifer works closely with those timelines. And in fact, we had the WACT conference yesterday, and we had people coming up to us now, when do these open and what are they for? What are the requirements? And so we'll talk through that. We haven't really fully developed what that could look like in terms of a recommendation, but that would be our next conversation to help streamline that.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative. Yes, as Wanda mentioned, we have not had many discussions around where we would exactly change those timelines to. But I do feel that the feedback we have received is focused on whether or not they are eligible. There are certain requirements they have to meet within each of those grants to be able to apply and receive the funding. And so that can be confusing as well.
Is that complete your presentation?
Mr. Chairman, I just have one last thing I really want to highlight. Thank you. It was just me recommending the partnerships that we are having. We have Dr. Mathern up here with the State Board of Career and Technical Education. We would not have fully had the efficiency with the Perkins State Plan had we not had the State Board of Career and Technical Education as partners. They served on our subcommittee. They were at the meetings. They were highly engaged in the work that happened. Also, we are partners with so many other people. The University of Wyoming is working to provide additional grants and professional development opportunities for our career and technical education teachers. We also want to recognize the community college. When we look at some of the federal funds that we had through ESSER, we know that it is the Fremont districts, and then we also worked with the community college to really streamline pathways. So looking at what pathways do the schools have, what pathways does the Central Wyoming Community College have, and how can we create and open doors for more students to actually stay engaged and stay in school. One of the other efforts that we're doing is really providing work keys trainings so that those students, again, have the opportunity to take that. They have the opportunity, but really recognizing and providing training for the teachers so that when students take that, we see more students eligible for the Hathaway Scholarship. I want to also highlight the partnership with WACT, our Wyoming Association of Career and Technical Education. They have been partners with us along with the university in hosting a conference the last couple of days, and we had record attendance. We know that the work that we do together is making a difference. And then our business and industry partners have served on many of our community and strategic plan initiatives. We could not do this work, and we would not be making the best decisions were they not partners with us and helping us further see the needs of industry. With that, I will close up my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mathern, you want to?
Yes, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, I would like to do just a quick update for you from the State Board. First of all, just to send, Bill Lambert sends his regrets in not being able to be here today, and he asked that I comment on the update that he provided you, and I think it's in your packet. Just a couple of things I'd like to say. First of all, the partnership with the WDE around the Perkins grant has been just really well done. We have a representative, Joe Kaspari, who sits on the group that worked in developing that state plan for Perkins. But in addition to that, WDE came to us several times where we had quite lengthy discussions about the plan before we approved it. The other thing I wanted to mention is the connection that CTE has to our graduate profile. When I think about the number of listening sessions that we had and the number of business folks that showed up at those listening sessions, it truly was helpful in trying to develop that profile. In addition to that, we've done several presentations to the business community, including the Wyoming Business Alliance, the Wyoming Construction Coalition, the State Chamber of Commerce, where we actually went and presented the profile of a graduate because they're interested and they want to know more about it. The other thing we've done with our board, our CTE board, is we have a subcommittee that's headed by Kristen Schlattman from Basin. And one of the things that she does in planning our meetings is to make sure that we always highlight some kind of CTE effort around the state. We've had presentations from Eastern Wyoming Community College, for example, and veterinary medicine or nursing or welding as just one example. And then finally, I'd like to point out that this same subcommittee has worked to develop a couple of documents that are open source documents. They can be published by various organizations around the state. We've sent them to the Chamber of Commerce, which represents 31 different communities here in Wyoming. We've sent it to the Wyoming Press Association, who works with 39 different newspapers. And the two documents are fairly simple, but I think they're really important. One is, what is CTE and what role does it play in Wyoming? And the second one is, how can a business be involved in career technical education? And that document, if you happen to click on that document, you'll notice it has lots of different opportunities for businesses to be involved. Everything from sponsoring an internship or connecting with a school district to have an apprenticeship or a mentorship, all the way to helping with our Skills USA competitions and those kinds of activities as well, even to the point of offering a scholarship or a grant for graduates to go on to some kind of career technical training beyond high school. So I just really wanted to point all of those out and express to this group this afternoon how pleased we are and appreciative we are of Wyoming's businesses engaging with us to say, how can we help? How can we train this workforce? We have, I just counted, I think at least 5 members of our board who are business people outside of education. And I know that they ask lots of great questions when we have our meetings, as well as the rest of us, of course. But I just wanted the committee to know that. Chairman Lambert wanted you to know that as well, that we have a dual role. We're both the state board and the CTE board. We take both of those responsibilities seriously. We dedicate at least half of our meetings to CTE concepts, and we formally gavel into one of those boards as well as the other. So it's a pretty serious role that we play, and I just want you to know that your authorization of us as a board, we very much appreciate that, and just wanted you to know that as well. Any questions?
Representative Lawley on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How can we get access? Can you send us those 2 documents that you mentioned? I think it would be great for the committee to have those, a great resource for us as well. So thank you so much.
Senator Scott, Representative Lawley, I think they're actually live links in the document, and you can click on those and they'll come right up.
Representative Berger.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. And has the board talked about providing and looking at qualifications or how districts or help districts to look at a CTE graduation track? You know, we have a Hathaway Success Curriculum track. We have a regular high school diploma. What about a diploma or a CTE type track or career?
Senator Scott, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Berger, we have not had that discussion. The role that we play in terms of setting a graduation track, I think, might be more appropriate at the district level. However, I am aware that several districts around the state actually acknowledge various kinds of micro-credentials and other kinds of completer concepts with, you know, different regalia. My granddaughter, for example, had some of those around her neck when she graduated from Kelly Walsh a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Piece of committee business coming up. How many people do we have that want to testify on the public comment when we get to that? I know of one. Anybody else? Two. Okay, so we'll have two of those. We've got, I think it'll be relatively brief, but it'll take a while. Committee, do you need a break for 10 minutes or can we just proceed on?
Break.
Okay.
10
Be
minutes.
back at 5 minutes to 4.
10 minutes.
need a break. I'm like.
We're gonna,
Running right down the agenda.
we're going right down the agenda. Go ahead, go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will be brief and quick. My name is Ben Moritz. I am the Executive Director of the Community College Commission. We thank you all for having us here. We were asked to say a few words about our CTE programs. In particular, you had asked us to address how we collaborate and cooperate with the K-12 districts, as well as how we work with BOCES and BOCHES. So we do not have a presentation. We do have a document that we shared with you. And in the interest of brevity and time, it might be most useful to just open this up to questions. We have done a lot of great work, and when I say we, I completely mean the colleges, to cooperate with their local districts. CTE is a core piece of what the colleges do and plays a large role in both its credit offerings and its non-credit offerings. And just as each college is independently run by its independently elected board of trustees, so does each college have its own take and approach to partnering with its local districts. We believe that that's a great way to capitalize on the unique strengths that each district has. And so rather than go into each and every one of those, I've summarized in that document 3 of the projects that are going on right now that we believe really epitomize some of that individualized approach towards serving the students in those districts and helping them get that CTE training that they need to get jobs. So I will pause. I should say one other thing on the agenda. It says that I am accompanied here by our CFO, Michael Swank. Obviously, I am not. This is our new Chief Academic and Student Services Officer, Dr. Laurel Ballard. We're happy to have her here, and we thought that especially with her previous role with the Department of Education, she would be a wonderful person to have here to also answer some of your questions. So with that, we are happy to answer.
We appreciate that approach, and we'll throw it up to questions. I will say I've been impressed with the CTE program in my local community college in Casper, and with the degree of cooperation between them and the school district on occasion. So I have positive feelings. So open the questions, Chairman Northrup.
Mr. Chairman, it's not a question, it's a comment. I just want to congratulate the colleges on being so quick and nimble to respond to input and to put in new programs and be able to get like the CDL truck driving, for example, up and going and make that a popular, I guess you didn't make it popular, but that everything worked out so well. So I just want to say congratulations to the colleges, and please continue to be quick and nimble, because that's the way the industry is right now.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Office. Senator.
I just said, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to kind of join in and chime in. I really have always believed that the community colleges were really central to what we're trying to address in terms of workforce development, and the CTE piece is really important. And I actually really appreciate how you have let the individual colleges sort of go into their area. What I see in Rock Springs is a little bit different than what you see in Gillette, what you see in Northwest College and Western Wyoming. We've kind of been there. I'm on Minerals Committee as well. So I really feel like that is very unique to Wyoming, and it really uniquely fits some of these areas and how they're specializing, so to speak. But anyway, I really do think you guys will continue to play a very central role as the future of CTE and just in general workforce development. So I appreciate all that you guys do.
Okay. In your office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So our colleges obviously have some pretty world-class equipment, and they've been tooling up very well in CTE over the last few years. I know that we have some engagement between typically local schools, high schools in dual and concurrent enrollment with the colleges. But consistent with our earlier conversation, has there been any exploration of really trying to expand that even more and reaching out to schools that might not just be right down the street, but finding ways that we can be broadening access to our colleges while at the high school level so that we don't have to have a world-class shop or facility in every one of our smaller schools, but they have access to the incredible resources that we have distributed throughout the state at the colleges? Is that under discussion?
Chairman Scott and Senator Rothfuss, thank you for that question. It is. And the conversations are, I can give you one good example at CWC, for instance. They are working with several of the school districts throughout Fremont County, particularly on the reservation, to talk about working out scheduling, which seems mundane, but if you can work out scheduling around the school day, you can use busing to bring students in from those districts that may be further down the street. A similar situation is going on at Eastern. Eastern has a very large service area all up and down the eastern side of the state. There are welding facilities and welding programs in Weston and in Crook, but they can't offer perhaps all of those welding areas. And so they're working with the districts and EWC to figure out how can they have some stackable certificates so that students can capitalize on what is available there at that college, or I'm sorry, at that district, have something that is an industry recognized credential at that point, but that stacks into something that would then have some of the more advanced welding, some of the technical equipment that they may not have in Weston, but that they would have down at Eastern.
Representative Berger.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I too, thank you for all you've done, the community college. And I sit on the Wyoming Business Council and Workforce Development Council, sorry, Mr. Chairman, and had a presentation from WCC about the classroom that's being built and almost done in Evanston for the certification to become a energy board, run an energy board, whether it's nuclear or through the coal plants. And I think it's going to be an awesome program. I think it's going to really help out a lot of people and give a lot of people a lot of direction there. And I just told our school CTE teachers about it last night, and they're excited. They didn't even know about it, and they're excited to go see it and start partnering up with Western Wyoming, and also kudos to streamlining to the Western Wyoming streamlining how our teachers, especially in Evanston, because we partner with Western to streamline classes and do more concurrent enrollment classes with our schools, and it's going great. So I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the Community College Commission, appreciate the brevity. And now we get to hear from the big spenders. WIP program. Okay, go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman. As you know, the Wyoming Innovation Partnership is a collaboration to align education, workforce development, and industry to support Wyoming's economic development needs. So it's a collaboration between all 8 of the community colleges, the University of Wyoming, the Department of Education, the Department of Workforce Services, and the Wyoming Business Council. And many of the programs that we are talking about today, or that the Community College Commission was talking about just now, are in alignment with what WIP is doing. So this is a summary just of the phase 1 programs, and I'm going to talk about phase 2 in just a minute. I just wanted you to have an overview very quickly. And as you can see, almost all of the programs that have been supported by WIP are CTE related. I would say the entrepreneurship ones and then some of the research programs are not specifically. However, they do have a tie to that as well. And so we started WIP in 2021. In November 2021, and
really looked at the different categories of workforce need. And as you can see on the right there, there's the 10-year projected growth of workforce need in each of those categories. So last year around this time, the governor approved funding for phase 2 programs, and these included 3 more categories of agriculture, manufacturing, and workforce development. And as you can see from these as well, almost all of those programs or all of those programs are CTE related. These are metrics from our phase 1 report. You guys have all had an opportunity to look at that report. So we actually are closing out phase 2 at the end of this month, and we will have a new report with metrics for phase 1 and 2. And a summary of success stories, as well as a return on investment report, which I think is really important and it's very exciting. I'm going to preview that in just a minute. But those will be, I'll be able to bring those to you in August with more details. We haven't quite closed everything out yet. The one thing that I do want to point out in these phase 1 metrics is that program enrollment. You can see almost double the number of students were enrolled, high school students. And so we really are working throughout to try to do dual and concurrent enrollment and to try to support those career pathways through these WIP programs. I also want to point out the number of industry and community partnerships. So these are the business and industries that are working with our community colleges and the Department of Education throughout the state of Wyoming that are really helping to shape these programs into what they need curriculum-wise and education-wise to fit their needs across Wyoming. And that those are different for every community. As was just stated, you've got different communities that are focused on agriculture, different communities are focused, I mean, the Powerline Tech program is a great example of that and the energy that's happening in Southwest Wyoming. And so I think it's really interesting to see the different collaborations in the different communities, but they're all happening in different areas and in different manners. And that's really exciting. I also heard the Department of Education talk about collaboration and how much they've seen that increase. I think that is just indication of the work that everybody is putting in to do a better job of working better together. And that's really what the Wyoming Innovation Partnership is all about. I'm going to, and hopefully this works, I'm going to share this short video just because I think it gives a really good preview about what CTE is to the folks in our communities. And I know you guys know this, but this is what we really get excited about when we are working through WIP programming. It's not. The noise is not working. Hold on. Might be able to just play it through.
Powerline Technology Program at Western Wyoming Community College.
Oh, all right. So as I said before, oof. All right. Okay, as I said before, we really are looking at return on investment, and I will have a return on investment report to bring to you all at your August meeting. I wanted to tickle this because this return on investment that we have for the Powerline Technology Program, not all of them are going to look this great, but this is a really awesome return on investment. So these programs, as you've heard, are very expensive to stand up. This was a $2 million investment. That's a lot of money to put into one program in one community college. However, the 5-year return on investment is 207%. That's massive for the state of Wyoming. That also is on top of that 207%. We have also partnered with the University of Wyoming Center for Business and Economic Analysis to do this return on investment. And because it was the first program, that's why we went with the Powerline Technology Program. So these additional cumulative economic benefits are the 319 jobs, the 80 million new gross state product, the 31 million labor income, and the one that I thought was really exciting was this 3.4 million in local tax revenue over 5 years. So that's pretty impressive. This is not just, this is just for an ROI in general. This doesn't even show what impact this has on our Wyoming students actually staying here in Wyoming. And you guys heard during the State of the State before legislative session, the governor talked about a gentleman named Owen. And Owen was a student that is in Star Valley. He went to Western Wyoming Community College straight out of high school. He got his degree in this program. After the first year, he worked interned for Lower Valley Electric. And they paid for his education for the second year and hired him directly out of college. He is now back in Star Valley. He's happy to be working at home. And they know that they're going to be able to keep him there. The weather in Wyoming is harsh. And so they were having to bring people in from Idaho, from a Powerline Tech program. There was the majority of the people they were recruiting. So this is really exciting. We have the great story that goes along with it. And I think that this just exemplifies what we want to see from CTE programs across the state of Wyoming.
Understand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We love our linemen, they keep our power on. So I just wondered, what created the 319 new jobs? Where did that come from?
So that is what the Center for Business and Economic Analysis pushed out as the 5-year expectation from this program. I'm actually going to have them come at the August meeting. We had one of them, but because we're running behind, they are going to be able to come and explain all of the methodology behind where they come up with all of those numbers. And it's slightly different for all of the programs. So I don't have an exact answer. I can get an exact answer and email it to you specifically for this, but we'll have the whole return on investment report in August for you, and we'll be able to provide that ahead of time. And I can get you an exact answer on what the methodology is behind how they calculated that.
Follow up. Yes, I'd like to have that because just because we have an educational program, it doesn't create the jobs, right? So we need to know where are the jobs coming from. I mean, it's great if we're filling a need, but you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman and Senator Steinmetz. I agree 100%. And like I said, I don't know, I'm not an academic. I don't know how they calculated that specifically, but they do have a methodology that they follow behind it. Absolutely. And I have one last video. This one is actually from Central Wyoming Community College. I'm going to turn my sound off on this and my sound on this one. All right, so like I said, that video outlined some of the work that Manufacturing Works is doing, which is another great partner for the Wyoming Innovation Partnership at Central Wyoming Community College. And I actually received a text message this morning from Rocky Case with Manufacturing Works, and they have a supply chain class that was occurring up there just this morning. And he said that it was a packed room and that it was going great. So these classes are happening across the state, and the partnerships are increasing just because of the Wyoming Innovation Partnership and being able to look at, what this impact is on the state. And the last thing that I have was for Central Wyoming Community College. Is President Tyndall online yet?
He is logged in, yes.
Awesome. All right. I don't know if he can hear us, President Tyndall.
He can't hear us. He's not in the room yet.
Oh, he's not.
Yes.
Okay. I know he was going to talk about some of the CTE programming that they're doing at Central Wyoming Community College and what an impact that's made on their local industries. One of those was a trail building program, and it ties into the tourism and hospitality program. And he's got some great stories and some great collaborations to tell in part to that. If he does not jump on though, however, we will move on and he can join us at our next meeting.
He is in the room, so if you guys
Fantastic.
are President Tyndall, you just want to turn on your camera.
Yes, there I am. Thank you. So, if I get my camera on, there I am with my college behind me. Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Yes, I'm here just to tell you a little bit about kind of a perspective of one college and how all these things are a little bit intertwined. So, obviously, with Jackson in our service area, we have a lot of strength in kind of food and hospitality tourism, but also because we have the Alpine Science Institute up in Sings Canyon, we do a lot of things with outdoor recreation. So that's another type of outdoor tourism that we do. So the picture on the left is our trail making program. And this was something that cost a fair amount of money because the equipment's not too terribly expensive, but there are some small backhoes and things like that. So it might cost more than you might imagine. But this is where it's really nice to see that, each college, I think that what I heard has kind of can take a hold of its niche for the state, if you will. And I think it's arguably true that with tourism and hospitality and outdoor recreation, just because of the nature of our backyard, we do a lot in that area. And that we find that there's this burgeoning need. Obviously, tourism is the number 2 sector in our economy. And trail making was something that wasn't really on our radar, but because of discussions with WIP, we're trying to think, what do we all need? And trails came to the surface. And it's just a matter of fact, people will ask, well, do we really need more trails? And I would think that the average Wyomingite who wants to see the tourism dollars, but not necessarily see the tourist on their lake and on their trail, the accessing of more lands for tourism to congest anything is a really great strategy. And as a matter of fact, Art Lawson from Fish and Game from the reservation, we spoke to him a couple weeks ago, maybe it was a month or so ago now, saying that he needed 40 trail builders yesterday, was the way he said it. And so there's definitely a need, and that's a really, really exciting thing. You saw the clip a moment ago about really that person is part of our Bootstrap Collaborative. They were talking about Central Wyoming, the trainings that going on, supply chain and other topics. But the general ecosystem in this area that is WIP funded is what we call the Bootstrap Collaborative. You lift yourself up by your bootstrap, people starting their own businesses and helping their businesses grow. And we have in partnership with others, about 100 or so clients of a variety of things. Some of them were our students, most of them were not. But it's very exciting that when you can actually count businesses and say you did not exist before 3 years ago, and now you're a multi-million-dollar business, $1 or $2 million. Typically, they're still on the small side. we had a student who graduated from the cosmetology program and has been assisted in starting a salon in Lander, a Native American woman. And there's a lot of exciting things like this with small businesses, food trailers, and things like this. And so I just wanted to mention that. The last thing, there was the slide that Ms. Shanefield showed was kind of the expected return of investment, or actually it was the growth in the industry by all these different sectors. And there was one that was kind of an outlier. It was the ag. It was anticipated growth of only 3%. And I think that is because we would need to invest in it. With ag as our second biggest sector, we can't ignore it. And it came up, I think in the end of phase one, we're all asking ourselves and people from the community, where's ag? And I know that President Seidel is pushing for that. The governor definitely saying, where's ag? This is important. And it was a big push from the governor's office saying, what can we do strategically for ag? And so you saw that range management is hugely important in a state with a lot of cattle. Also, you saw controlled environment agriculture. And you think, what the heck is that? Well, it could possibly be a game changer for our state. And my college and some others have some funding for this. But basically, controlled environment agriculture is kind of like the greenhouse or the vertical harvest type of thing. CWC's particular niche in that is we're exploring, under UW's guidance, shipping containers with LED light and trying to grow really crops such as lettuce, high value kind of garden type of vegetables and whatnot that can grow very, very quickly in different conditions. And so we're kind of at the proof of concept stage to see if the growth and the yields are as promised from the vendors of these. But then the critical question will be energy use. You could grow vegetables on the moon. You can. It just costs a lot of money. You can grow vegetables in Antarctica, but the energy cost pretty much makes it so as a business, it would not pencil out. And so the energy use on our shipping container is going to be really, really critical. If we can show that you would make money on these things, LED lights don't use a whole lot of energy, but heating and cooling can. So it's that energy management piece that if we can lick, it could be a game changer for Wyoming. And I know I've said a lot of things quickly, but what's exciting is we're partnering with one another. My ag faculty were at UW, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, working with their controlled environment agriculture people. And we've also, even though we're not a big player in that software engineering space, software engineering has a huge potential for our state. And so we are a part of that as kind of an appendage. And what we're seeing with these programs is they tend to grow as we kind of proof of concept. Another college says, I want to participate in a smallish way. I think we can offer some classes and provide some feeder students into this. And so it's really, really exciting, honestly, as an economic development person, that's my background, that we're all working together. And I'm probably have said enough. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Okay, so that concludes your presentation.
Yes, and I would just refer everyone to our website if you've got additional questions about the programs. There's lots of additional videos, lots of success stories. I look forward to being back in August with the return on investment report and our phase 2 report. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We'll have to talk about the August meeting agenda.
Yeah.
We haven't set that yet.
Of course.
So, okay. Thank you much. Next is University of Wyoming. Steve?
Hello again and good afternoon, Chairman Scott and members of the committee. My name is Jenna Shim and I'm the John P. Jack Albogan Dean of the College of Education at UW. Joining me is Mr. Rob Hill, our CTE outreach consultant. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present on career and technical education today. Please allow me to reintroduce myself very briefly. I'm relatively new to my current position. However, I have been with UW for the past 15 years, and I have been deeply committed to our college, university, and our state. I'm dedicated to continuing my best efforts to serve Wyoming and our citizens, and this is the responsibility and commitment that I feel honored to embrace. As I hold our land-grant university mission in the highest regard, my vision and mission on behalf of the College of Education is to serve Wyoming and our people through educational excellence and opportunities. The need for more CTE teachers in Wyoming has remained unchanged as long as I can remember, dating back to 15 years ago. Since I was appointed as the interim dean of the College of Education last May, I have had the privilege of traveling across Wyoming, visiting community colleges, mines, manufacturing industries, makerspaces, CTSO leaders, school districts, and businesses. I have also had the honor of meeting with legislators to discuss matters related to CTE. What became clear to me is that we needed to prioritize our efforts to recruit more students into our CTE program to expand the CTE teachers pipeline in the state. When visiting school districts, I was informed that many high school CTE programs are forced to close because many cannot find qualified teachers. Fewer CTE teachers also lead to larger classroom sizes, which compromises the quality of their training. In the case of closing programs, community colleges enrollment is compromised. Consequently, industries and businesses in Wyoming are struggling to hire skilled trade workers within the state. As a matter of fact, last month actually was back in April when we visited the mines, we were told that they had over 100 openings. In other words, the shortage of CTE teachers has a serious ripple effect in the state's economic development. As part of our priority on CTE teacher recruitment, Mr. Rob Hill joined our team as the college's outreach CTE consultant. Mr. Hill, who just received the Lifetime Achievement Award in CTE, is a longstanding CTE advocate in Wyoming and a former high school CTE teacher. Mr. Hill and the College of Education have been working hand in hand during the past year. Our motivation and goal is that by boosting number of CTE teachers in the state, we can support economic conditions in which Wyoming citizens can find fulfilling careers, stay in the state instead of leaving the state, and support and enhance local businesses and industries in meeting their workforce needs. The broader impact of these efforts is to promoting not only educational advancement for individuals, but also long-term economic and social stability and growth in Wyoming. This perfectly aligns with our land-grant university mission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Since the 1990s, Wyoming has lost 22% of its CTE teacher workforce. And that may not seem like a lot, but when a community loses an agriculture teacher, a business teacher, or a welding teacher, it has a very negative impact on the community. Today, the median CTE teacher age is 52, and the average retirement age is 62. That number is 59 at the national level. This contrasts with the average of all Wyoming teachers at 42. So Wyoming CTE teachers have been aging out. We expect to lose half of our 500 school district teachers over the next decade, if the data holds consistent, which it has over the last 5 years. The reason this is important is that we know that when students take a sequence of CTE courses, they graduate at a 95% rate nationally and in Wyoming. And this compares to the state rate of 81.4%, as the department spoke to. I think this is important, that 92% of students involved in CTE and their parents are satisfied with their high school experience, compared to 78% of those not involved in CTE.
Research also shows that nationally, the social cost for average high school dropout is approximately $272,000 over their lifetime in terms of lower tax contributions, higher reliance on Medicaid and Medicare, higher rates of criminal activity, and higher reliance on welfare.
We also know that 91% of high school graduates who earn 2 to 3 CTE credits enrolled in college. The vast majority of CTE concentrators are headed to post-secondary education. Students that concentrate on CTE in high school enroll in college at a slightly higher rate than their peers and are just as likely to graduate at the same rate. 8 years after graduating high school, those that focused on CTE have higher annual earnings than those that did not. We have roughly 19,000 students in Wyoming who take a CTE course at the high school level and another 12,500 at the college level. Combined, they are a large target market for advancing CTE courses. The very newest data is encouraging and shows interest is increasing. Currently, we have a high demand job forecast for CTE teachers and graduates.
To recruit more candidates into our teacher education program and enhance the CTE teacher pipeline, we have made significant progress in our Phase 1 efforts. This includes establishing a close partnership with community colleges and the Wyoming Department of Education. Last semester, we launched a bridge introduction course in CTE. The purpose of this course is to give community college students a taste of what a career in CTE teaching can be like. This 3-credit bridge course is offered through UW, and if students decide to apply to our BAS program in CTE, they can use these 3 credits toward their BAS degree. If they choose not to pursue a BAS in CTE, community colleges have agreed to do a reverse transfer so that they can use the 3 credits toward their AAS degree. Many thanks to private donors, business and industry partners, and Wyoming Department of Education, we're currently offering this bridge course at no cost to students. In the spring, we had 21 students, and in the summer, we have 9 students enrolled in this bridge course. And between our BAS and graduate certificate teacher education program in CTE, we now have 18 students enrolled, compared to a historic average of 1.7 students.
To provide context to the course we're offering, it's important to understand that in each community, there's a CTE ecosystem consisting of school district students and teachers, college students and instructors, and business and industry entities. The ecosystem starts with a qualified teacher at the district level, which leads to more students entering post-secondary education, which in turn leads to graduates who supply much of our Wyoming workforce. The limiting factor has been a sufficient number of teachers to create a pipeline of CTE students. By offering this course with local mentors who are helping these students network in their communities with CTE professionals, we are helping bridge the gap that happens every time a student moves from one level to another level. This online course covers important topics CTE teachers need to understand in the profession, like local district job offerings and contracts, business and industry partnerships, facilities and programs, methods of teaching, CTE policy, exposure to exceptional educators and administrators in our communities, the Hathaway Scholarship, and CTE state and federal funding. Students are working alongside outstanding CTE educators where they can make local connections and create a network of colleagues. Students are learning from experts in CTE, including WDE, the colleges, and the current technical student organization directors. There are 61 Associates of Applied Science degrees available in the Wyoming Community College system that lead into this BAS degree. This offers a tremendous opportunity to recruit students from our Wyoming Community College system. Business and industry partners are excited about the opportunity to work together, and we've devoted time for our students to learn about key industries in our communities in the greater state. Groups like the Wyoming Business Alliance, the Wyoming Mining Association, the Wyoming Hospitality and Travel Coalition, the Wyoming Construction Coalition, and the Associated General Contractors are partnering with us to educate potential teachers about course sectors in our state. Of our initial courses where we targeted community college students, we found there was a cross-section of interested students, including college faculty, district teachers, tradesmen, veterans, paraprofessionals, and business owners. We are seeing students enroll in the BAS program from this course. The course appears to be making a difference. Our aim is to continue to offer this course 3 times a year in the fall, spring, and summer, and that some of these students will continue to apply to the UW BAS CTE program.
As we have visited with various stakeholders, we realize that we also have to be innovative from within. So we're also innovating again and revising how we are offering our courses, offering more education courses in 8-week format instead of 16 weeks to meet the needs of complex lives of our adult students. Also, UW has a policy in place where students can earn up to 12 credits for their prior learning. This was a point that was brought up earlier in discussion today and also yesterday during WACD panel discussion. The college is exploring ways to expand the number of credits that we can grant for those who have had extensive career. So if somebody had 30 years of welding experiences, that we should be able to grant more credits. As we continue from phase 1 to phase 2, further developments are underway. One notable aspect of phase 2 is that Mr. Hill will be joining the college full-time, which is made possible by the generous support of a private donor. We have also formed a CT advisory board comprised of stakeholders from school districts and community colleges. We also have been working closely with business and industry leaders to align our program and curricula to the needs of the state.
During phase 1, many of our school districts expressed a desire to work collaboratively in recruiting high school students into the CTE teacher profession. Therefore, we're currently developing a bridge course tailored for high school students, and we will be partnering with Wyoming school districts even more closely. To realize this goal, I'll be traveling extensively to school districts across the state to work with them. By recruiting from Wyoming high schools, we will also be recruiting for community colleges, leveraging their resources and expertise in CTE content areas.
In order to sustain our work, just last week, the College of Education at UW has submitted a Teacher Quality Partnership Grant from the U.S. Department of Education. Also, just last week, we had a meeting with Wyoming Community College Commissions, and we are in the process of planning and developing a more synchronized and coordinated advising system between Wyoming Community Colleges and UW. This system would grant advisors from UW College of Education early access to CTE-related programs at Wyoming Community Colleges. The aim is to identify promising CTE teacher candidates earlier and streamline their educational journey more effectively. Now, to broaden this system, tomorrow, as a matter of fact, that between President Tyndall, Dr. Moritz, Provost Carmen, and myself have a meeting to explore the possibility and how we can develop co-enrollment system between Wyoming Community Colleges and University of Wyoming.
Looking ahead, phase 2 holds promise for further expansion and collaboration, and we're looking forward to providing more updates in the near future.
The level of support and collaboration from community colleges, school districts, business and industries, and Wyoming Department of Education has made the progress so far possible, and it's been a pleasure and honor to be part of this important endeavor. With that, Mr. Chairman, we would be happy to stand for any questions and comments.
Yeah, I do have one which is similar to what I was asking a few minutes ago. That, you know, in a lot of instances, the colleges around the state have better equipment for CTE from a training and use standpoint, depending on what the specific area is. Most of the time, we're used to our students going from the colleges to the university and not going back again, but we have circumstances where the facilities are better at our college sometimes. Do we have any discussion ongoing between the university and the colleges and the CTE community to try and figure out how perhaps we could be doing some of the more advanced training, specific advanced training in skills areas at the colleges instead of here at the university so that we're traveling back around the state?
Chairman Scott and Senator Rothfuss, that's the very design of the program, is capitalizing on the technical expertise of the community colleges. And so most of the students would take their technical training in one of those 52 AASs. So they would focus on welding at the college they may be at, and then they can take online courses with the university and work locally with their school district to proceed through to licensure.
Are those 3,000 and 4,000 level courses though, even offered at the colleges so that they're getting the appropriate upper division credit where that's appropriate towards the education degree? I mean, that's kind of more what my concern is there. Maybe they already are, but that was what my thought process was.
That's where we're heading in terms of more streamlining the educational journey. And we are exploring possibility of co-enrollment or also synchronized and coordinated advising so that we can be much more efficient and providing more access to advanced both content area and pedagogical area in terms of what we're offering. We have also started to collaborating with different colleges within universities. So our first collaboration is with construction program in College of Engineering. And as they offer construction minor, students who are enrolled in our BAS program can enroll in construction minor so that they could specialize in a particular area. Right now, what we offer is much more generalized CTE teacher program. And that's important because in many smaller school districts in Wyoming, they are not able to, and they cannot afford to hire welding teacher, construction teacher, and culinary teacher separately. However, in larger school districts that we have found much more specialized CTE teachers are in demand.
Let me raise one point. It strikes me that CTE is an area where work experience may be of particular value. And a lot of your teachers probably ought to have some. If there are changes that are needed in either our licensure statutes or some of our other statutes to facilitate that kind of recruitment into CTE teaching where you get that experience and they get some academic credit for it, please approach this committee because I think that'd be something we would be interested in doing to facilitate.
Okay.
So feel not rigidly bound by the existing statutes. If you encounter a problem, please let us know and come to us because that is something that could be changed.
Thank you, Chairman Scott.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to have the Wyoming Association for Career and Technical Education, and then we'll have a couple public comments. So why doesn't everybody involved come up front and we'll proceed more rapidly. So, thank y'all.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Chairman Scott and committee. I've actually asked both of these folks to stay up here because we're looking for more collaborative effort. And knowing that you were supposed to adjourn about 15 minutes ago, I'll keep this pretty brief. But I first just wanted to say thank you because as Chairman Scott referenced, I am Jessie Defoe with the Wyoming Association for Career and Technical Education, and this week has been phenomenal. We've had our group here on campus. We've had the highest attendance with over 250 teachers and stakeholders who are saying that this is important. UW, community colleges, WDE have all been a part of that, but you have been a part of that. Thank you for making time in your busy schedule to making our lunch panel happen and having genuine conversations with our teachers. It's a sincere thank you. Also looking back to last year, up front here, we have two of our state directors. We have Stacy Broda with FFA and also Janie Wilcox with Skills USA. And they both, along with all the directors and all CTSOs, just say thank you because this was a historic time for them to see funding that they had never seen previously. So just the fact that we're having this discussion, all the discussion that came before me is an exciting time. And so thank you very much. The two quick things that I wanted to capitalize on while we had your time was first off, the University of Wyoming just talked about all the great things that they're doing. And we saw that and we thought, oh my gosh, UW is responding to some of the concerns that we have said year after year after year. And they mentioned kind of phase 2. And so when we approached them and said, is there an opportunity? That's the memo that you'll see in front of you that we have submitted as some recommendations that we have that they're seem fairly open to. And I want Dr. Shim to visit with that too. But we'd like to look at another course. We saw the success of this first course with current students in community colleges. And we said, what if we take it down to the high school level, offer some concurrent enrollment, and really see if there's an appetite for students to see this as a potential path earlier. We also would like to look at some AI training, not only for our current teachers going through this program, but also our experienced teachers. I think is probably the best way to say that, so they're not overwhelmed by it, but they're really folded into the process. I appreciate the note that Senator Office had just brought up. Community colleges have fantastic equipment, but we also have teachers here who need to learn how to use that equipment too. And so when it's at all possible, let's travel when it's not. Could we have some equipment maybe here that might be beneficial? And after touring the facilities myself, I would encourage you to look at them as well. And then finally, you'll probably read about the 5 days of trade, just providing that type of retention, retooling, and opportunity for everybody across the state. I think that there's a capacity and desire for collaboration that we haven't seen before and could be really great. And so, Dr. Shim, if you'd like to comment on any of that.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As you've heard numerous times already, the College of Education and WACD have been closely collaborating on CTE initiatives, including addressing the CTE teacher shortage in the state. As also you have heard, and many of you have participated, that we hosted WACD conference here on our UW campus. I believe that this was the first time that has ever happened. So it was historically very symbolic and important. So phase 2 in our collaboration, WACD and College of Education have identified several ideas that Ms. Defoe has just presented. The College of Education fully supports these ideas, and we are very committed. So if this committee is interested in proposed ideas, we would be honored to provide more details, information in the near future.
And last but not least, we won't let Mr. Rob Hill leave WACD ever. And so I've asked him to stay up here and to visit about 2 areas in particular that WACD would like to visit about that were mentioned earlier today in some presentations that are an opportunity. And so, Mr. Hill, let's take it away.
Chairman Scott and committee members commenting on behalf of the Wyoming Association of Career and Technical Education, very much in support of streamlining of the grants, and that's been a persistent kind of problem over here. I know those grants have come into existence at different times, but right now we see a need for it to be more cohesive and better aligned to our teachers, and that make sure they have an understanding of that. Also, if the committee would be interested in looking at other areas, we think an equalizing fund or an equalizing grant of sorts for our small to medium-sized schools. As an example, in Perkins Funds, Fremont County number 24 in Shoshone gets about $8,000 to $11,000, and in Natrona County they get about $400,000. Now, a lot of the technical equipment we have is $40,000, whether you live in Shoshone or Casper, and so when we approach this from an access point, we see that our small and medium schools are probably compromised in technology. So maybe an opportunity to explore that area and hopefully catch our students up to the same access that's available in our larger areas. Those are the comments that we would be welcome to look into more for the committee if you so desired. Thank you.
On that minimum level concept and trying to equalize, Mr. Wilmarth earlier today mentioned that previously we had a minimum of 2 units of funding that would be provided, and now we're calculating it as a partial, so it ends up going below 1 based on my understanding in our smaller districts. And maybe you haven't thought about this, but that's an easy change to just go back to something where we say it shall be calculated with a minimum of 2 in our funding model for that. It would still go into the block grant at that point in time, but at least it would be designated theoretically for this is appropriate for a minimum CTE. Do you think that would be a reasonable start?
Yeah, I think there's, Mr. Chairman and Senator Rothfuss, I think there's a couple of ways to do that through, and certainly that being one of them. You know, I think that we've seen the need for that, and the means, I know, we'd probably have to look into it a little bit deeper, because it's complicated if we look at it from a district standpoint. For instance, in Toronto County has 2 large schools and then 2 small schools. So if we were to do it from a district standpoint, it wouldn't necessarily work, but if we did it by a school standpoint, I think that might be something to think about.
And Mr. Chairman, quick follow-up. You know, is that more aligned with the needed interests, or would expanding our equipment grant program in a way that, well, was either better funded or with the intent for better distribution, or some combination thereof? Is it the equipment side that we should be looking at, or overall funding model side?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I think, you know, the two areas that are the hardest to meet demand there are these technical equipment pieces, and then the consumables. They can be very expensive in our programs, and they can eat up a budget in a small town very easily.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
One thing we're gonna have to consider if we start getting into that, we've got some ultra small school districts and counties with much larger districts. And we may have to think about, before we do fund everybody fancy equipment, we may have to do a little consolidation. Otherwise it's gonna get just plain too expensive. And we'll have equipment that isn't utilized very much because there aren't very many people to utilize it. And that's going to be unfortunate. So we've got some issues to think about there.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I agree with that. I do think that, you know, just getting something like that drafted so we can see the number and what the impact would be. I don't know how many districts would end up falling at that bottom level, but a lot of times when we raise the floor a little bit, it doesn't end up being that costly. Although some other times, as you know, it does end up being very costly. So I don't have a real good estimate of what that would cost to address the small schools.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. I think that it would be a good idea to have LSO look into those numbers and see how they work out. Make sure that we can afford it first off, and then just give us an idea of whether it's 2 or 1 or 1.5 or whatever factor we use.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, so we'll ask LSO to do that on that issue. Is that all right with the committee?
I think so. I think in the interest of time, though, getting the very short bill drafted so that we have a number there that we could change, started at 2, minimum of 2, get those numbers and then consider it. I don't think that's more than like a 1-pager, hopefully, but if we don't have it before us, we can't act on it. So I'd ask that that be drafted.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's pretty straightforward. We can accompany any estimates along with the bill draft, either through a staff comment or through a separate memo.
Excellent.
Mr. Chairman, can we give LSO some latitude on that?
Yeah, they'll take it anyhow.
Yeah.
They always know it.
Okay. Okay, anything else on this?
Sir.
Okay, thank you very much. We do have public comment. Gentlemen and Sherilyn, come on up and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Sherilyn Kaiser, and I represent the Wyoming Airports Coalition. And actually, I'm not presenting today. I'm here to introduce Devin Brubaker with the Southwest Wyoming Regional Airport. And he's just going to provide a very quick, because the hour is late, report and kind of an update of what's happening with airports. And so Devin is online.
see.
Yes, my name is Jason Egemeyer. Chairman Scott and members of the committee, I'm simply here to hopefully very briefly testify as to what I have been seeing. I just finished 4 days at the Wyoming Association of Career and Technical Educators Conference. If you want to know the
You're not the one connected with Sherilyn.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I believe we need to let him in the room, and I think Ashley's working
When
on
you said
that.
proceed, I thought you.
Yeah,
told me to
I-
go. Apologize.
I was confused as to who was who.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Devin is on Zoom.
Okay, let's get him in, and admitted, and then we'll come to you. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Appreciate the opportunity and thank you for the introduction, Sherilyn. My name is Devin Brubaker. I'm the airport director for the Southwest Wyoming Regional Airport in Rock Springs. I'm here today representing the Wyoming Airports Coalition and to talk a little bit about aviation CTE. I appreciate the discussion you've had this afternoon surrounding CTE in both K through 12, as well as in our secondary or post-secondary system around the state, and we want to bring to your attention some opportunities for the state of Wyoming. Over the last 100 years, 100 plus years, Wyoming has had a storied history in aviation, going back to the U.S. Airmail route that had stops in Riverton, Rawlins, Rock Springs, and Cheyenne. And quite honestly, at one point, Wyoming was home to the world's largest aircraft maintenance facility and flight attendant training facility. There's storied histories of aviation throughout Wyoming, including both military and civilian operations. And even today, we're home to one of the world's most successful aircraft manufacturers in Afton. Unfortunately, over the years, our state has lost its superiority in the aviation and aerospace industry, though. Meanwhile, our neighboring states have instead embraced the aerospace industry in their economic diversification efforts, creating tens of thousands and in some cases, hundreds of thousands of jobs. Despite this, there is over 2,200 aviation jobs in the state of Wyoming, with several more coming online in several communities across the state, including here in Rock Springs and up in Jackson. Wyoming has a few active aviation CTE programs to support support the industry. However, they're not quite adequate. We have two facilities in post-secondary, our Casper College and our Northwest College. Both have a aviation CTE program surrounding commercial pilot training. Our K through 12 system, there's a few aviation BOCES courses around the state. And then the Rock Springs High School has announced that they're starting a 4-year aviation program this fall. While we recognize that we do not want to utilize Wyoming resources to hire our neighbors' workforce, there is robust worldwide demand for these training programs due to the critical workforce shortage that we see both here and across the globe. This can provide a very lengthy runway as we build and expand on the state's demand for these positions. With the newly reauthorized CTE grant programs from the Federal Aviation Administration, the know-how of our community colleges, the great CTE staff at our high schools, and some free CTE curriculum support from industry trade associations, there's a phenomenal opportunity to take advantage of the high demand our industry has for the qualified workforce. We've shared with you, I believe Sherilyn has already passed it out. If not, she will, a short one-pager that has quite a bit of information related to the demand in our industry for workforce, both across the country and in the state of Wyoming. It's our goal. We recognize that it's not going to happen today, but it's our goal that this committee will recognize the need to at least explore an opportunity to expand aviation CTE in the state of Wyoming. And we as the Wyoming Airports Coalition are prepared to work with you all, as well as the community colleges, the Wyoming Military Department, private enterprise, and any other stakeholders that may be of interest in this endeavor to explore opportunities for Wyoming to regain our prominence in the aviation industry. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and happy to answer any questions the committee has.
Committee, any questions? I will say I'm a little familiar with the Casper program because I have a grandson that is exploring that at this time. So, okay, thank you very much. This is the kind of thing that we are excited about. So,
Chairman Scott, members of the committee. So I teach in construction as well as engineering technology at Casper College. I have for a little over 20 years now. And I'm
Yeah.
also academic
Yeah,
chair of multiple
could you give us your
programs.
name again?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jason Eggemeyer. Actually, aviation is one of the programs as well that I'm actually academic chair over. Aviation, electronics, multiple programs. So I'm actually really excited about the things that he said as well. But that's not what I'm here for today. Today, I just finished 4 days of conferencing with colleagues, colleagues from high schools, high school teachers, high school faculty, high school administrators, superintendents even. More people that I've not seen at conferences like this ever before. It was exciting. Community college administrators and faculty, as well as faculty and administrators from the College of Education here at the University of Wyoming. This is the best Wyoming Association of Career and Technical Educators conference that I've ever been to. And I've been to my share of them. If you want to feel the pulse of CTE in the state of Wyoming, go spend 4 days with very little sleep, going to professional development and breaking bread with your colleagues. They are an exciting group of people. They are an extremely passionate group of people. And when I say passionate group of people, career and tech educators, that's not just identifying an image in your head perhaps of the motorhead or the high school kid that loved to live in the wood shop, but the career and tech ed teachers here, they get passionate about their fellow man and helping them with careers. I'll tell you, I get really excited when I see one of my former students that is starting their own business or has a family and a successful life. When you say that you have a passion for CTE, those are really the kind of things that the vast majority of these teachers truly do think about. The teamwork that I have seen over the last year and a half, the collaboration, teamwork, and then response, especially from the University of Wyoming, has been profound. And when I say response, asking what is wrong. And there's been a lot that's been wrong in the past several years. In the last 20 years there at Casper College, I have witnessed the ups and downs of the career and technical education program. Seen much of it from the sideline. Most every graduate from the University of Wyoming over the last 20 years, I've had in at least one class. I have known them, and I tend to know my students pretty well. I do tend to talk, and they do too then. And you get to know students. It's one of the best parts of the job, honestly. The administration and the College of Education, they have asked what are the problems, and they didn't stop there. They responded. Things are happening. It is truly amazing to me, and I don't say that lightly. The 4,000 level bridge course that Rob Hill has been teaching, that idea was hatched on almost a napkin, and Dr. Shim made it a reality almost before our eyes. The speed of the response, the accuracy, it's been amazing. The next phase of the 2,000 level class, Taylor making that class for students that are in their senior year perhaps of high school, that have identified, that kid that loves to be in the wood shop. That's a passion that they have. We should support them in their passion. And that's what this is. It's really, really exciting right now. I'm working with colleagues of mine at other community colleges to develop a, modify really, a new AAS degree for career and technical studies to help feed this BAS program at the University of Wyoming. There are so many plans that are actually coming to fruition. In the short period of time, it sums it up to say that we have those of us, and I believe most of, if not all of you, share this, those of us that are passionate about helping people with career and technical education. And when I say that, of course, helping people better their own lives, find careers, all of those things. We've been playing defense for a long time. I'm really excited. We're on offense now. So I thank you. And if you have any questions, please.
Seeing none, thank you for giving us an upbeat note
Absolutely.
to.
I
end
was
this
excited
particular
to be able
discussion.
to do that.
Okay. Mr. McKay, I understand you've got something for us, very briefly, Business Alliance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rennie McKay, President of the Wyoming Business Alliance. And unfortunately, I'll be a bit of a downer now, but really approaching this from a slightly different perspective. And that is I represent our members are job creators. And through the Business Alliance and our partner associations, we represent tens of thousands of employees or jobs that have been created by the private sector. And as I've gotten to know them in my couple months on the job, they're facing a pretty significant issue right now, and that is jobs, workforce. And if you dig into the statistics, it's not just anecdotal either. We are right now, and it really has diverged since 2021, we're now down about 10,000 jobs compared to job openings today, compared to the workforce, we're about 10,000 short. So this is really constraining the businesses that I represent as the president of the Business Alliance. But what I'm really excited about is to have been here this week, had the honor to be the facilitator for the industry panel with WACD, and there are really good things happening. We are creating jobs. The private sector is creating jobs very well right now. I think if you look at those numbers, we're now at the most jobs in Wyoming's history, but we're 10,000 short on people. So I really appreciate what you all have done this week. You took on two topics that I think are important to that. CTE is definitely one of those. And you forgot, I think we heard numbers that we're talking about, 12,000 students that can come through these programs. So if we can get them to stay here and see the jobs in Wyoming, we can start to fill those openings that are available today. And then you also took on early childhood education. That's another constraint on getting workers out there into those positions. So thank you very much for the work you've done. And I just wanted to put a fine point on that challenge that the private sector is facing right now.
Okay. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe not a question for you, Mr. McKay, but if you have a response for it, I'd like to hear it. But I think something we've heard a lot of today is like, we're grateful that we have these programs, and I think everybody's really excited about them. But I do want to point out that, I'd like to hear potentially from students as well. What do they want? How do we get them excited about what classes they have so we can take this number that has grown and we can increase it even substantially more? Because at the end of the day, we're serving children. And I appreciate the job creation and I appreciate those efforts, but we talk about bringing joy back in school. And we talk about how can this committee serve our children, our future for Wyoming. And I don't want to miss that point of conversation. So I just want to kind of bring us back to that, Mr. Chairman.
That's really an element. And can we match the recruitment needs we have with the general desires that our students have? Because you can offer a fine program, but if you can't get students, then it isn't going to do any good. So let me ask Mr. McKay one question. Are you able to communicate adequately with the CTE people all through the education system as to what the needs, real needs of industry are and where the job openings really are? Are we starting to see some mesh between what's being offered and what you need?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. It's, as I get to know the membership better of the Business Alliance, that's one of my primary questions, because I think we've actually got a lot of amazing programs out there. A lot of it's about connections. So that is a goal as I move forward, is to find those folks who haven't found the connection and just make it, because I think, one, we've got young people who are interested and passionate about those careers that we need. And so we're not missing that issue. And we spend well on education, as you all know. So, I think it is just about those connections. And that certainly is going to be an area I'm focused on, is to find out where any of the connections are missing. Because I think that we just might need to connect wires, and we're going to charge this thing.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we got two items that I'm aware of. Representative Obermuller, you wanted some information from the LSO on a particular topic?
Mr. Chairman, I do. Based on some testimony from LSO today, if they could prepare a tutorial reminder to the committee for the next meeting on Wyoming Works and the Wyoming Tomorrow's program, the current status of those programs, and invite the stakeholders to those programs to testify at our next meeting.
Okay, let's get, at this point, let's assign the LSO to give us a brief memo and brief and to the point on those two issues. And then we'll discuss that as to how we're going to handle that at the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make a clarification? Is it the Wyoming Innovation Partnership and the Wyoming Works, or the Wyoming's Tomorrow is a scholarship program? The Wyoming Works was a temporary scholarship program and a kind of a grant for equipment or program. It was kind of a blend of WIP and Wyoming Works. I'm fine to provide that tutorial. I just want to make sure I'm targeting the research appropriately. Okay. We'll work with the Community College Commission. They oversee those programs, and we'll work with Director Moritz on that.
Okay, thank you. Second one is we had a request for a bill consolidating the grant programs in the CTE equipment. I think that request was well enough worked out to result in a bill draft. Chairman Northrup and committee, is that all right with you all to request that as a bill draft? I think it might prove to be a simple and pretty passable bill.
Mr. Chairman, that's on my notes. I was going to bring it up if you didn't, so good job.
Okay. Okay.
And Mr. Chair, I won't belabor the point, but you did create that new career technical education equipment and supplies grant. And it looks at historical spending of school districts' CTE dollars for those purposes. If you increase small school districts' funding in the block grant, they may become ineligible for that grant. But I just want to make sure as you think through this policy, take that till August, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
I'll bring that up in August, but I was just pontificating what
But
might
on the
happen.
consolidation, I think we heard an argument to consolidate that. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we also heard that Perkins is a tough grant to be able to get into, and there was talk about maybe getting a task force put together. I don't know if that's the right way to handle that, but we probably ought to tackle that a little bit and see if we can make the Perkins grant more manageable.
Let's ask the high school CTE people that are most affected on that and the State Department of Education, give us some suggestions in writing briefly after you've thought a bit about it. What the heck can we do about Perkins, if anything? Maybe the best we can do is simply write to the congressional delegation and say there's a real problem.
Right.
So. Okay, anything else Anything else? Okay, committee, we're adjourned. The August meeting is in Casper on what dates in August?
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's the last week of August,
26th, is thereabouts,
28th and 29th
28th and 29th,
in Casper, Wyoming.
Casper. Okay, with that, we're adjourned.